He treated her like she was invisible while bragging about his success to impress investors. When her shift ended and she walked in with 4-year-old triplet girls in matching dresses, his confident facade crumbled as paternity papers landed on his table. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The air carried promises of renewal as Boston emerged from winter's grip that spring day in 2008. But the hopeful season felt distant from the small Cambridge apartment Shayla Thompson called home. Sitting on the edge of her bed, she stared at the plastic stick in her trembling hands, the 2 pink lines unmistakable in their declaration. "Positive," she whispered, her voice barely audible even in the quiet room. At 23, Shayla had meticulously planned every aspect of her life since leaving Roxbury. First-generation college student, scholarship recipient, dean's list every semester despite working 30 hours weekly. But this single pink line alongside its confirmatory partner was no part of her carefully constructed path toward stability. She checked her watch. Dylan would be back from campus soon. Her boyfriend of 2 years was finishing his final semester at Harvard, while she completed her junior year at Boston University. Their relationship had surprised many, the privileged white son of Boston aristocracy and the hard-working black girl from Roxbury who'd fought her way into higher education. Yet for 2 years, they'd existed in a bubble where those differences seemed to dissolve in their shared ambitions and genuine connection. Or so she believed. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Almost home. Big news." Shayla took a deep breath, tucked the pregnancy test into her pocket, and tried to calm her racing heart. They would figure this out together. Dylan loved her. They had talked about a future, hadn't they? Not explicitly about marriage or children, but about being partners in life's journey. Surely this unexpected detour wouldn't derail them completely. 20 minutes later, the apartment door burst open. Dylan Miller strode in, his tall frame vibrating with excitement, blue eyes brilliant beneath perfectly styled sandy hair. Even now, Shayla marveled at how effortlessly handsome he looked in his rumpled Oxford shirt and faded jeans that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. "Shay, it came!" He waved an envelope triumphantly. "Harvard Business School! I got in!" His enthusiasm was contagious, momentarily pushing aside her anxiety. "Dylan, that's amazing. I knew you would." He pulled her into an embrace, lifting her off her feet in a circle. "This is it, Shay. This is everything I've been working for. 2 years of MBA, then straight to either Goldman or launching my own investment firm. In 5 years, I'll be running my own company." He kissed her forehead. "And it's all falling into place exactly how I planned." The words, "exactly how I planned," hung in the air between them as he finally noticed her muted reaction. "What's wrong? Aren't you happy for me?" Dylan's brow furrowed, his celebration faltering. Shayla took a deep breath and pulled the pregnancy test from her pocket. I have news too." Dylan's eyes fixed on the plastic stick. His expression transformed from confusion to recognition to something that made Shayla's stomach clench. Calculation. Pure, cold calculation, as if she'd presented him with an unexpected business problem to solve. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice nearly a whisper. The silence stretched between them like a widening chasm. Dylan stepped back, running his hand through his carefully tousled hair. He paced to the window, then back to the kitchenette counter, keeping physical distance between them. "How certain are you?" he finally asked, his tone eerily businesslike. "The test is 99% accurate. I'm about 6 weeks along." Dylan nodded mechanically. "And you're sure it's—" "Yes, it's yours," she cut in sharply, hurt flashing across her face. "How can you even ask me that?" He raised his hands defensively. "I had to ask. This is significant." Another long pause filled the room as Dylan stared at the Harvard acceptance letter still clutched in his left hand, then back at Shayla and the pregnancy test. "This doesn't fit my timeline, Shay," he finally said, his voice measured and controlled. Harvard, MBA, my career trajectory. A child would destroy all of that. Shayla felt as though she'd been doused in ice water. Our child, Dylan, our child would destroy your plans? He winced at the word our, but continued, his tone clinical. Be realistic, Shayla. I have a very specific path ahead. Business school, connections, the right social circles. My family has expectations. This would derail everything. So what are you saying? Shayla's voice rose slightly, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach. Dylan looked at her directly then, his blue eyes cooling from summer sky to winter ice. I'm saying that a girl from Roxbury and a baby don't fit into the future I've mapped out. My parents, my colleagues, the circles I need to move in. He gestured vaguely with his hands. It just won't work. Each word landed like a physical blow. A girl from Roxbury? Is that all I am to you after 2 years? You were fun, Shayla. Really, you were. You're smart, beautiful, ambitious, but I always knew this was temporary. The casual past tense struck her like a slap. Temporary? We've been together for 2 years. You brought me home for Christmas. Dylan sighed, looking momentarily uncomfortable. As a phase, Shayla, my parents always understood I would eventually settle down with someone appropriate. He chose the word carefully. Someone from our social circle. You're not exactly Miller wife material, you understand? The room seemed to spin around her. Every loving word, every promise, every intimate moment between them suddenly recontextualized as something cheap and disposable. She wasn't a person to him. She was an experience, a liberal experiment before returning to his predetermined path. Get out, Shayla whispered, tears threatening but held back by sheer will. Shayla, don't be dramatic. We need to discuss this rationally. Get out, she shouted, her voice breaking. Take your Harvard letter and your plans and your appropriate future and get out of my apartment. Dylan grabbed his jacket, pausing at the door. You need to think clearly about this, Shay. Call me when you're ready to discuss practical solutions. The door closed behind him with a quiet click that somehow hurt more than a slam would have. Shayla sank to the floor, arms wrapped around her middle, rocking slightly as reality crashed around her. For the first time in her life, all her careful planning, all her hard work, all her determination seemed utterly insufficient against the mountain now looming before her. 3 days later, Shayla moved mechanically through her shift at Seaport Harbor, an upscale restaurant where she worked as a waitress to cover tuition costs. Her manager had already reprimanded her twice for distraction, but she could barely focus on the wealthy patrons and their elaborate orders. She hadn't heard from Dylan since their confrontation, her calls and texts unanswered. Table 12 requested you specifically, her coworker mentioned, nodding toward the corner. Shayla's heart lurched when she saw Dylan sitting there, impeccably dressed in a navy blazer, scrolling through his phone with an air of casual detachment. She considered asking someone else to take the table but knew a confrontation was inevitable. Better here, where she had to maintain professionalism, than another emotional scene in private. Good evening, sir. Can I get you something to drink? She kept her voice neutral, pad ready, as if he were any customer. Dylan looked up, his expression unreadable. Just water, thanks. I won't be staying long. When she returned with his water, he motioned for her to sit. I can't. I'm working, she replied stiffly. It'll just take a minute. Please. Reluctantly, she slid into the chair across from him, keeping her back straight, hands folded in her lap. I've thought about our situation, Dylan said, his tone measured, as if discussing a business proposal. He slid an envelope across the table. This should resolve the problem. Shayla stared at the envelope without touching it. What is this? Open it. Inside was a check for $5,000 and a handwritten note. For the procedure or whatever you decide, but this is the end of my involvement. Don't contact me again. The restaurant's dim lighting seemed to darken further as blood rushed to Shayla's head. You think you can simply pay me to disappear?" "I'm being generous, Shayla," Dylan replied, adjusting the Rolex on his wrist, a graduation gift from his parents. "Many men in my position wouldn't offer anything. You've always been realistic. It's one of the qualities I appreciated about you. You know we would never have a future together." His words were calm, reasonable even, which made them all the more devastating. "Why not?" she asked, though she knew his answer would only wound her further. Dylan leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice. "Let's be honest. You're not sophisticated enough. You don't have the connections, the education, or the background I need in a long-term partner. My world has certain expectations." "Your world," Shayla repeated hollowly. "The world where people like me serve people like you, where we're good enough to sleep with but not to build a life with." A flicker of discomfort crossed his face before the polished mask returned. "That's unnecessarily dramatic. We had a good time together, but we both knew it would end eventually." "I didn't know that," Shayla whispered, dignity keeping her tears at bay. "I thought what we had was real." Dylan stood, straightening his designer jacket. "Use the money wisely, Shayla, and don't tell anyone about us. It would be embarrassing for both of us." He walked away without looking back, leaving the envelope on the table like a gratuity for services rendered. 2 weeks later, Shayla sat alone in the sterile examination room of Boston Community Health Center, her threadbare sweater pulled tight around her despite the room's warmth. She had made the appointment to discuss her options, still undecided about what to do, Dylan's check untouched in her drawer. The middle-aged doctor entered, her kind eyes reviewing the chart. "Ms. Thompson, I have your test results." Shayla nodded, bracing herself. "Everything looks healthy with your pregnancy, but there's something you should know." The doctor adjusted her glasses. "The ultrasound shows multiple fetuses. You're carrying triplets." The word hit Shayla like a physical blow. "Triplets? 3 babies?" "Yes. 3 heartbeats, all strong. This will be a high-risk pregnancy requiring specialized care." The room seemed to tilt as implications cascaded through Shayla's mind. 1 baby had seemed impossible enough, but 3? 3 infants needing diapers, formula, clothes, 3 college funds to save for, 3 humans depending entirely on her. The father, the doctor began delicately. "There is no father," Shayla interrupted, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. "He won't be involved." The doctor nodded without judgment. "There are resources available for single mothers, support groups, financial assistance." But Shayla was already calculating. Her scholarship covered tuition but not living expenses. Her waitressing job barely paid rent. Her mother's Social Security checks after her disability barely covered her own medications. 3 minimum wage jobs might provide enough if she abandoned her education temporarily. No sleep, no social life, no breaks, just survival. That evening, Shayla sat on the floor of her apartment, having moved out of the place she had shared with Dylan. She had already picked up applications for a cashier position at the local supermarket and a night shift at a call center. Her shift at the restaurant had been reduced to mornings only. "Customers don't like being served by single pregnant women," her manager had explained unsympathetically. Rain pattered against the window of the dingy one-room rental in Dorchester, the only place she could afford now. On the convenience store newspaper she'd bought lay the Boston Herald, its front page featuring a smiling Dylan Miller at a charity gala, his arm around a senator's daughter. The headline read, "Harvard's rising star begins Wall Street internship." His confident smile, his perfectly tailored tuxedo, the elegant young woman beside him, all painted a picture of the world that had rejected Shayla as unworthy. The contrast with her current reality, sitting on bare floorboards, surrounded by job applications, her eyes hollow from exhaustion, could not have been starker. But something crystallized in Shayla Thompson that rainy night as she gently caressed her still flat stomach. The despair that had threatened to drown her since Dylan's rejection transformed into something harder, something unbreakable. "He thinks we're a mistake," she whispered to her unborn daughters. "An inconvenient detour in his perfect trajectory. He thinks I'm not enough." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "My daughters, I promise you this. We will build such an extraordinary life that the whole world will know Dylan Miller made the biggest mistake of his life when he walked away from us. One day he will look at what could have been part of his life and fully understand what he lost." That night marked the end of Shayla, who accepted limitations. The next morning she deposited Dylan's check, not to give up her daughters but to invest in their future. It was the first capital of what would become her empire. While tucking away Dylan's uncashed check, Shayla couldn't possibly imagine that those same $5,000, strategically invested, would become the first stone in a billion-dollar empire that would one day engulf the business of the man who had rejected her. While tucking away Dylan's uncashed check, Shayla couldn't possibly imagine that those same $5,000, strategically invested, would become the first stone in a billion-dollar empire that would one day engulf the business of the man who had rejected her. The alarm pierced the darkness at 4:30 in the morning, its shrill tone cutting through Shayla's fitful sleep. Her body, heavy with exhaustion and the growing weight of her pregnancy, protested as she forced herself to sit up on the edge of the thin mattress. For a moment, she allowed herself the luxury of simply breathing, hands cradling the small but distinct swell of her abdomen where her 3 daughters grew. "Okay, little ones," she whispered. "Another day begins." Her studio apartment in Dorchester, the cheapest she could find after leaving Cambridge, was barely 500 square feet, with water stains mapping the ceiling and a temperamental radiator that clanked through the night. But it was clean, and it was hers, and for now, that had to be enough. The morning routine had become a precisely choreographed dance of efficiency. Shower in 3 minutes flat. Hair pulled back severely. No time for styling. A banana and prenatal vitamin for breakfast. The waitress uniform laid out the night before, now requiring safety pins to accommodate her 14-week belly. By 5:15, Shayla was at the bus stop, her breath forming clouds in the chilly spring air. An elderly woman who worked cleaning offices downtown nodded in silent solidarity. Another person whose day began while the privileged still dreamed. The Harborview restaurant opened at 6:30 for the breakfast crowd. Businessmen with expense accounts and tourists willing to pay $25 for Eggs Benedict. By 6, Shayla was tying her apron in the back room, listening to the manager's morning briefing. "Thompson," he called as the staff dispersed, "I've reassigned your section." Shayla looked up from her order pad. "Is there a problem with my tables, Mr. Levine?" The middle-aged man's eyes flicked to her stomach, then away. "We're moving you to sections 14 through 17, in the back." The worst tables in the house, far from the windows, close to the kitchen noise, typically reserved for walk-ins and tourists who wouldn't return anyway. Tables that guaranteed minimal tips. "May I ask why?" Her voice remained professional despite the knot forming in her throat. Mr. Levine shuffled uncomfortably. "Look, Thompson, you're a good server, efficient, never late, but—" He gestured vaguely toward her midsection. "The customers in the front sections, they're regulars, businessmen. They don't feel comfortable being served by a pregnant, unmarried—" He caught himself. "It's just not the image we want to project in our premium sections." The unspoken word hung between them. Unmarried, pregnant black woman. 3 strikes in Boston's still segregated social hierarchy. "I understand," she said quietly, though rage simmered beneath her calm exterior. She needed this job too desperately to fight. The morning shift stretched interminably. Her feet, already beginning to swell from pregnancy, throbbed in the mandatory non-slip shoes. The tables in her new section tipped poorly, if at all. By the time her shift ended at 2, she'd made just $28 in tips, barely enough to cover the day's bus fare and a modest lunch. There was no time to eat that lunch, however. She had exactly 23 minutes to reach Marketplace Foods, where her second job as a cashier began at 2:30. The supermarket uniform, a red polo shirt and khaki pants, no longer fit properly. She'd spent precious dollars on fabric to expand the waistband, sitting up after midnight with a needle and thread, her stitches clumsy but functional. The store manager had already warned her twice about her unprofessional appearance. "Thompson, you're on Register 4, barked the floor supervisor, a pimply 20-year-old who seemed to relish his minimal authority. "And try to pick up the pace today. Your line was backing up yesterday." "Yes, sir," Shayla replied mechanically, taking her position behind the counter. For the next 6 hours, she scanned groceries, making small talk with customers who rarely looked directly at her. Her back ached from standing, but cashiers weren't allowed to sit. When a wave of nausea hit, morning sickness cruelly persisted throughout the day. She had to breathe deeply and focus on the items passing under the scanner. At 4:15, during her mandated 15-minute break, Shayla sat on a milk crate in the back storeroom, unwrapping a peanut butter sandwich she'd prepared that morning. 3 bites in, another wave of nausea forced her to the employee bathroom, where she retched quietly, one hand braced against the stall door. "You okay in there?" called a concerned co-worker. "Fine," Shayla managed, rinsing her mouth at the sink. "Just pregnancy stuff." "My sister had terrible morning sickness too," the woman offered. "Does your husband help with—" "I should get back to my register," Shayla interrupted, unable to bear another conversation about her absent husband. By 8:30, when her shift finally ended, the fatigue was bone deep, but there was no time to rest. Her third job, taking customer service calls for a credit card company, began at 9 and ran until midnight. At least this one she could do sitting down, from the relative comfort of her apartment. The bus ride home was a blur of exhaustion. 2 teenage girls whispering and giggling caught her attention. They looked about the age she'd been when she'd earned her scholarship to Boston University, full of dreams and ambitions that now seemed from another lifetime. At her apartment, Shayla changed into sweatpants, the only comfortable clothing she had left. She set up her headset at the small desk squeezed into the corner, logged into the call center system, and prepared for 3 hours of being berated by angry customers. "Thank you for calling Premier Credit Services. This is Shayla. How may I assist you today?" Her voice transformed into a pleasant, professional tone that masked her exhaustion. "My statement is wrong, and you people are trying to rob me," began the first caller, launching into a 15-minute tirade about a $30 late fee. Call after call followed the same pattern: angry customers, accusations, thinly veiled insults. All while Shayla maintained her calm, soothing tone, apologizing for inconveniences she hadn't caused, promising resolutions she had no power to provide. At midnight, she logged out of the system, her throat raw from talking. Her feet had swollen so badly that her ankles were barely visible. When she finally removed her shoes, the relief was so intense it brought tears to her eyes. Too tired to shower, she collapsed onto her bed, setting her alarm for 4:30. Tomorrow would bring the same punishing routine, and the next day, and the next. As sleep began to claim her, Shayla's hands moved protectively to her stomach. "We'll get through this," she whispered to her daughters. "Somehow, we'll make it." By the beginning of her second trimester, Shayla had developed a system. The morning sickness had finally abated, allowing her to work more effectively. She'd negotiated with her night job to work 4 hours from home rather than 3, increasing her income slightly. Every dollar was meticulously tracked in a worn notebook, categorized into essentials and savings for the babies. Her waitressing uniform had become a problem. After struggling with safety pins and improvised panels, she'd finally approached her manager. "Mr. Levine, I need to order a maternity version of the uniform," she stated one morning. "I've looked into it, and the company that supplies our outfits offers a pregnancy option." The manager sighed heavily. "Those cost nearly twice as much, Thompson." "I understand. I'm willing to pay the difference." He eyed her expanded midsection critically. "Honestly, Thompson, how much longer can you even work here? You're showing more every day, and the customers—" "The Americans with Disabilities Act protects pregnant women in the workplace," Shayla interrupted, her voice quiet but firm. "Pregnancy discrimination is illegal. I've researched this thoroughly." The surprise on his face was almost worth the anxiety the confrontation caused her. He hadn't expected the girl from Roxbury to know her rights. "Fine. Order the uniform, but I'm monitoring your performance closely." That small victory sustained her through another grueling day. At the supermarket, however, things were deteriorating. The floor supervisor had taken to timing her transactions per minute, standing behind her with a stopwatch, loudly announcing when she fell below the expected rate. 23 seconds per item, Thompson. That's 5 seconds too slow," he declared loudly enough for customers to hear. A well-dressed woman in line frowned. "She's pregnant with multiple babies. Perhaps you could show some compassion." The supervisor flushed. "Company policy applies to everyone, ma'am. Pregnant or not, the customers can't wait." "I'm the customer," the woman replied coolly, "and I'm perfectly happy to wait." Shayla kept her eyes down, scanning items methodically, grateful for the stranger's defense but humiliated by needing it at all. That night, as she massaged her swollen feet after her call center shift, a knock at the door startled her. It was nearly 1 in the morning. No one ever visited. Cautiously, she peered through the peephole to see her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Martinez, holding a covered dish. "I'm sorry it's so late, Carita," the woman said when Shayla opened the door. "I made too much stew, and I've seen you coming home at all hours. A mother needs to eat well." The simple kindness broke something in Shayla. Before she could stop them, tears were streaming down her face. "Oh, mija," Mrs. Martinez murmured, stepping inside and setting the dish down. "It's too much for one person, isn't it? These babies, these jobs." "I'm okay," Shayla insisted, wiping her tears. "Just tired. Thank you for the food." Mrs. Martinez looked around the sparse apartment, noting the pile of library books on business and entrepreneurship beside Shayla's bed, the carefully organized basket of prenatal vitamins and pregnancy literature. "You're studying? Even with everything else?" Shayla nodded. "I have to finish my degree. It's the only way forward for us." The older woman shook her head in admiration. "My daughter works nights too. Maybe we can help each other? When the babies come—" It was the first offer of real support Shayla had received, and it felt like a lifeline thrown to a drowning person. Later that week, between shifts, Shayla visited the university library, checking out books on business management and entrepreneurship. Her professors had agreed to let her complete coursework remotely next semester when the babies would arrive. At a back table, surrounded by students who seemed impossibly carefree, she studied while highlighting passages about supply chain optimization and sustainable business models. Food distribution inefficiencies account for approximately 30% of waste in urban centers, she read, underlining the statistic. Something about the problem resonated with her, perhaps because she'd seen firsthand how much food the restaurant discarded nightly while people in her neighborhood went hungry. On a napkin from her pocket, she began scribbling ideas. App connecting restaurants with excess food to shelters? Subscription model for discounted near-expiry groceries? Community-supported agriculture delivery system? The ideas were rough, unfocused, but they sparked something in her mind that felt like purpose beyond mere survival. As her pregnancy advanced into the 3rd trimester, work became increasingly difficult. Her body, supporting 3 growing babies, rebelled against the punishing schedule. The doctor had warned about the risks of preterm labor with multiples, especially given her stress levels and physical demands. "You need to reduce your workload," the clinic doctor advised during her checkup. "Triplets are always high risk, and you're showing signs of potential complications." "I can't afford to work less," Shayla explained, the reality harsh but immutable. "There's no one else to support us." The doctor's expression softened with concern. "What about the father? Family?" "There is no father in the picture. My mother is on disability herself. It's just me." The doctor made a note in her file. "I'm referring you to a social worker who specializes in supporting single mothers with multiples. There may be programs that can help." On the bus ride home, Shayla dozed off, exhaustion claiming her briefly. A gentle hand shook her awake. "You're stopped, dear," said an elderly woman, her eyes kind. "Don't want you to miss it." "Thank you," Shayla mumbled, gathering her things and making her way to the door. She'd been falling asleep on buses, in break rooms, even standing up sometimes, her body desperately stealing moments of rest whenever possible. That night, she sat at her tiny kitchen table, counting coins from her tip jar and making calculations in her notebook. The social worker had connected her with a program that provided some baby essentials, diapers, formula, basic clothing. But the financial puzzle remained daunting. 3 babies meant 3 of everything, and her savings, while growing, wouldn't stretch far enough. As she worked the numbers, her gaze fell on a newspaper left behind by a previous tenant. There, on a wrinkled page, was Dylan's face, attending some society function, his arm around a blonde socialite. The caption identified her as Melissa Winthrop, daughter of Senator James Winthrop. Something twisted painfully in Shayla's chest. While she counted pennies to afford baby formula, he attended galas with senators' daughters. While she worked 3 jobs with swollen feet and an aching back, he leveraged family connections for career advancement. "You're not sophisticated enough," his voice echoed in her memory. "You don't have the connections, the education, or the background I need." Shayla closed the notebook with trembling hands. For a moment, despair threatened to overwhelm her. Then, almost defiantly, she reopened it to a fresh page and wrote at the top, 5-year plan. Under it, she listed 1. Complete degree, 1 year, 2. Develop business concept, 6 months, 3. Seek seed funding, 6 months, 4. Launch startup, 1 year, 5. Achieve profitability, 2 years. It was ambitious, perhaps impossible, but as she wrote each goal, something hardened within her, a determination that transcended mere survival. One day, she whispered to her unborn daughters, "We'll show him and everyone else exactly what we're capable of." While massaging her swollen feet after 16 hours of work, Shayla didn't imagine that in 15 years she would be stepping off private jets in Louboutin heels, leading meetings that would determine Dylan Miller's fate. While massaging her swollen feet after 16 hours of work, Shayla didn't imagine that in 15 years she would be stepping off private jets in Louboutin heels, leading meetings that would determine Dylan Miller's fate. The first contraction hit without warning. Shayla gasped, clutching the edge of the supermarket checkout counter as pain radiated across her abdomen. At 32 weeks pregnant with triplets, she'd been warned this might happen. Her body simply wasn't designed to carry 3 babies to full term. "Thompson, you're holding up the line," her supervisor snapped, then noticed her expression. "Oh God, are you—" "I think I need to go to the hospital," Shayla managed between clenched teeth, her knuckles white against the counter. Everything accelerated into a blur. A customer calling 911, the ambulance, paramedics asking questions she could barely focus enough to answer. "Is there someone we should call? The father?" "No, father," she replied automatically. "No one." At Boston Medical Center, doctors moved with controlled urgency. Terms like preterm labor and neonatal intensive care swirled around her as they administered medications to slow the contractions and steroids to help the baby's lungs develop. "We'll try to buy them more time inside," the obstetrician explained. "But with triplets at 32 weeks, you should prepare yourself. They'll likely need to be delivered soon." Alone in the hospital room between monitoring sessions, Shayla reached for her phone with trembling fingers. Despite everything, some irrational part of her wanted to call Dylan to tell him his daughters might enter the world today. Her finger hovered over his contact, still there after all these months, before she set the phone down. Instead, she called Mrs. Martinez, who promised to bring her hospital bag and stay as long as needed. For 2 days, the medical team managed to stall the inevitable. On the third morning, however, Shayla woke to a rush of fluid and the unmistakable knowledge that her daughters had decided it was time. "The babies are coming now," she told the nurse who responded to her call button, surprising herself with how calm she sounded. Within minutes, the room transformed into a hive of activity. A team of neonatologists joined the obstetricians. Forms were thrust before her, risks were explained. And through it all, Shayla felt strangely detached, as if watching from above as they prepared her for an emergency C-section. In the operating room, bright lights blinded her as the anesthesiologist administered the spinal block. The sensation of numbness crept up her body, and then came the strange pressure as doctors worked behind the blue drape separating her from the view of her own abdomen. "I'm scared," she whispered to the nurse holding her hand. "You're doing great," the woman reassured her, squeezing gently. "Your babies are lucky to have such a strong mother." Moments later, a thin cry pierced the clinical atmosphere, followed by the announcement, "Baby A, female, time of birth 8:43 a.m. "She sounds strong," the nurse told Shayla, whose tears now flowed freely. "Baby B, female, 8:44 a.m. The second cry was fainter, more tentative. "Baby C, female, 8:45 a.m. The third baby made no sound at all, creating seconds of terrifying silence before a team member called out, "Respiratory assistance needed." "What's happening?" Shayla asked, panic rising. "Is she okay?" "They're working on her," the nurse explained. "Your smallest baby needs a little help starting out." The next minutes stretched into an eternity as Shayla caught only glimpses of tiny, wrinkled bodies being whisked to warming stations. The medical team worked with practiced efficiency, their voices a technical symphony of jargon and vital signs. "All three stabilized," someone finally announced. "Weights, 4 pounds 2 ounces, 3 pounds 14 ounces, and 3 pounds 8 ounces. "Can I see them?" Shayla asked, her voice breaking. A nurse brought each swaddled infant close enough for a brief glimpse, impossibly small bundles with translucent skin and wispy dark hair, before they were rushed to the NICU. Their faces, scrunched and reddish, held none of the chubby newborn features Shayla had imagined, yet they were the most beautiful sight she'd ever beheld. As they wheeled her to recovery, a nurse with a clipboard approached. "We need information for the birth certificates. The babies' names?" Shayla had decided months ago, during nights spent alone reading pregnancy books and dreaming of their future. Destiny, Hope, and Faith Thompson. "And the father's name?" the nurse asked routinely. The question hung in the sterile air. Shayla could name him, legally bind Dylan to these children with a stroke of pen, force him to acknowledge what he'd discarded, but that would tie them forever to a man who saw them as inconvenient mistakes. "There is no father," she stated firmly. "Just leave that section blank." The nurse's expression betrayed a moment of judgment before professionalism reasserted itself. "As you wish." The NICU became Shayla's world for the next 6 weeks. Between brief shifts at work, she'd had to drop the telemarketing job but clung desperately to the other two. She spent every possible moment in the sterile environment of beeping monitors and incubators. Each transparent box contained a tiny daughter, connected to tubes and wires that sustained their premature bodies. Destiny, the largest, graduated from breathing support first. Hope followed a week later. Faith, the smallest, fought hardest, her fragile lungs struggling to function independently. Shayla learned to navigate the frightening landscape of medical terminology, to read oxygen saturation levels, to understand bradycardia episodes. She memorized each doctor's assessment and each nurse's observations, becoming an expert in her daughter's care. "You're quite remarkable," commented Dr. Chen, the lead neonatologist, finding Shayla asleep in the uncomfortable chair beside Faith's incubator at 2 in the morning. "Most parents can't maintain this level of presence, especially single parents." "I don't have a choice," Shayla replied simply. "They only have me." During kangaroo care sessions, The precious skin-to-skin contact that helped the babies develop, Shayla would hold each daughter against her chest, whispering promises and dreams into tiny, perfect ears. "Destiny," she murmured to her firstborn, "you're going to create something extraordinary that changes the world." To her second daughter, "Hope, you'll bring beauty and light to dark places." And to her smallest fighter, "Faith, you'll stand up for what's right when no one else will." The nurses exchanged glances at these ambitious declarations to infants who still couldn't maintain their own body temperature, but Shayla spoke with absolute conviction. On particularly difficult nights, when Faith's monitor alarmed repeatedly, or when exhaustion made the fluorescent lights blur into halos, Shayla would sometimes wonder if Dylan even knew his daughters had been born. If he ever thought about the pregnancy he'd paid to resolve. The anger that flared at these thoughts provided energy when her body had nothing left to give. At the 6-week mark, a milestone arrived. All 3 babies had reached 5 pounds and could maintain their temperature. They were ready to go home. "Are you sure you can handle all 3 alone?" Dr. Chen asked during discharge planning. "Triplets are challenging even for 2-parent households with resources." "I've made arrangements," Shayla assured her, not mentioning that these arrangements consisted primarily of Mrs. Martinez's generous offer to help between her own work shifts and a patchwork schedule that would leave Shayla with approximately 4 hours of sleep per night. The tiny apartment had been transformed. A church donation program had provided 3 second-hand bassinets. A mother's support group had contributed bags of gently used clothing, meticulously washed and folded by Shayla during late-night laundromat trips. Formula companies had sent samples after she'd written explaining her situation. The day the babies came home, Mrs. Martinez was waiting with a pot of chicken soup and practical wisdom from raising her own children. "For triplets, you need a system," she declared, showing Shayla how to arrange the feeding station with bottles prepared in advance. "And you must learn to feed 2 at once, like this." She demonstrated a technique using pillows to position 2 babies simultaneously, saving precious minutes in the relentless cycle of feeding that would consume their days and nights. That first night alone with her daughters, reality settled over Shayla like a heavy blanket. The constant needs of 3 newborns created a fog of exhaustion unlike anything she'd experienced. When all 3 cried simultaneously at 3 in the morning, she sat on the floor between their bassinets and wept alongside them, overwhelmed by the immensity of her responsibility. Yet by morning, she had created her first system, color-coding the baby's clothing and bottles, purple for destiny, green for hope, blue for faith, to ensure each received proper medication and formula amounts. It was the beginning of the organizational skills that would later help her manage a corporate empire. "You're sure about returning to classes?" Mrs. Martinez asked 2 months later, watching Shayla pack 3 diaper bags with military precision. "The babies are still so young." "I have to," Shayla replied, checking off items on her list. "My scholarship requires continuous enrollment. 1 more semester of leave would mean losing it completely." The logistics were daunting. Mrs. Martinez would watch the girls during morning classes. Another neighbor, a retired teacher named Mrs. Washington, would take the afternoon shift 3 days a week. On other days, Shayla would bring the babies to class, having negotiated with understanding professors who recognized her determination. That first day back on campus, Shayla entered the lecture hall with a triple stroller and the constant anxiety of disrupting class. To her surprise, several classmates immediately offered help, cooing over the sleeping infants and offering to hold them if they fussed. "You're actually doing this," marveled her study partner Aisha, gently rocking Faith. "College, 3 babies, 2 jobs. You're like Superwoman." Shayla managed a tired smile. "Not super, just no other options." As the semester progressed, Shayla developed a surreal routine, feeding babies while highlighting textbooks, recording lectures to review during middle-of-the-night feedings, writing papers one-handed while cradling a fussy infant with the other. Her grades remarkably improved rather than suffered, the razor-sharp focus of someone who couldn't afford to waste a single minute. Dr. Eleanor Winters, her business strategy professor, noticed. After class one day, while Shayla was packing the babies into their stroller, the distinguished older woman approached. "Ms. Thompson, your analysis of the case study was exceptional today," she said, helping to secure Hope's blanket against the spring breeze. "Particularly your insights on resource allocation in constrained environments." "Thank you, Professor," Shayla replied, surprised by the personal attention. "I have some practical experience with resource constraints." Dr. Winters laughed softly. "I imagine you do." Her expression turned thoughtful. "You know, in 20 years of teaching, I've never seen such determination. Most students would have deferred, transferred, or simply dropped out facing your circumstances. Those weren't options for me," Shayla said simply. "That's precisely what interests me. You see possibilities where others see insurmountable obstacles." She reached into her briefcase. "I'm starting a research project on women entrepreneurs from non-traditional backgrounds. I could use a research assistant who thinks differently. The position comes with a stipend." Shayla stared at the business card Dr. Winters extended. "I don't know if I can. Flexible hours, work from home when needed, and the triplets are welcome in my office." Dr. Winters smiled. "Think about it. You have the makings of something extraordinary, Ms. Thompson. I'd like to help nurture that potential." That evening, feeding the babies in their carefully orchestrated rotation, Shayla allowed herself to imagine a future beyond survival for the first time since Dylan's rejection. The pain was still there, a hollow ache when she glimpsed happy couples on campus or saw fathers doting on their children in the park. But something new was growing alongside it: ambition, purpose, vision. The babies reached their first birthday on a warm June day. Shayla splurged on a small cake, dividing it carefully into 3 portions on tiny plates. She'd saved for weeks to buy matching outfits, simple but pretty dresses from a second-hand shop that she'd embellished with ribbons in their signature colors. As she positioned them for a photo with her ancient flip phone, tears welled unexpectedly. They were thriving despite everything, destiny already trying to stand independently, hope babbling complex sound combinations, faith observing everything with startling intensity. "Make a wish, my loves," she said, helping each baby blow out the single candle she moved between their plates. That night, after they were asleep, Shayla opened her laptop, a refurbished model Dr. Winters had helped her acquire, and began working on her class project. The assignment was to identify an inefficiency in a major industry and propose an innovative solution. Her focus: food waste in the restaurant industry. Her thoughts kept returning to her days at Harbor View, where perfectly good food was discarded nightly while shelters across the city struggled to feed their residents. There had to be a better system, a way to connect excess with need efficiently. As she typed, concepts began taking shape: a mobile application, real-time inventory tracking, volunteer transportation networks. The idea energized her, keeping her working well past midnight despite knowing the babies would wake before dawn. Dr. Winters's reaction to her project outline the next day was immediate and enthusiastic. "This isn't just a class project, Shayla. This could be a viable business model with real social impact." "It's just an idea," Shayla demurred, bouncing faith on her knee during their office meeting. "The best businesses start as just ideas," Dr. Winters countered, "and yours addresses a genuine market inefficiency with a scalable solution." She tapped the paper thoughtfully. "You know, I'm hosting a small gathering next month for female entrepreneurs and investors. You should present this concept." "Me? Present to investors?" Shayla laughed nervously. "Professor, I'm a junior with triplets and no business experience." "You have something more valuable than experience: authentic insight and untapped perspective." Dr. Winters smiled as Hope crawled determinedly toward a bookshelf. "Besides, you're raising 3 babies while maintaining a 3.9 GPA and working 2 jobs. If that's not entrepreneurial spirit, I don't know what is." As she gathered her daughters and research materials, Shayla felt something unfamiliar stirring. Not just determination or necessity, but genuine excitement about the future. For the first time since Dylan's rejection, she was dreaming beyond survival. "Your project isn't just viable, Shayla. It's revolutionary," Dr. Winters said as they parted. "I know people who need to hear your ideas." While clipping the triplets into their stroller, Shayla couldn't know that her university project about connecting restaurants with excess food to underserved communities would be the first step toward building an empire that would one day make Dylan Miller beg for her attention. While clipping the triplets into their stroller, Shayla couldn't know that her university project about connecting restaurants with excess food to underserved communities would be the first step toward building an empire that would one day make Dylan Miller beg for her attention. The auditorium erupted in applause as Shayla Thompson crossed the stage, her black graduation gown flowing behind her. At 26, she had done what many considered impossible, completed her business degree with honors while raising triplet daughters. In the front row, 3-year-old Destiny, Hope, and Faith clapped enthusiastically, their matching yellow dresses bright spots among the sea of formal attire. "That's my mommy!" Destiny announced loudly, causing ripples of appreciative laughter around them. Mrs. Martinez, who sat with the girls, gently shushed them while beaming with grandmotherly pride. "Yes, mijas, that's your very smart mommy." As Shayla accepted her diploma, she scanned the audience briefly, a habit she couldn't break. No matter how illogical, some part of her still half expected to see Dylan there, witnessing what she'd accomplished, despite his dismissal. Instead, she found Dr. Winters' encouraging smile and her daughter's excited waves. Those tiny hands raised in celebration meant more than any recognition from the man who deemed them unworthy of his future. After the ceremony, as families gathered for photographs and celebrations, Shayla knelt to embrace her daughters, their small arms tangling around her neck. "Are you a doctor now, Mommy?" asked Hope, always fascinated by titles and achievements. Shayla laughed, adjusting the plastic barrette in Hope's curls. "Not a doctor, sweetheart. I have a business degree now. It means I can build something important for us." "Like a castle?" Faith suggested seriously. "Something even better," Shayla promised, gathering them close. "Something that will help people and secure our future." Dr. Winters approached, elegant in her academic regalia. "Your daughters stole the show," she observed warmly. 3 perfect graduation gifts." "The best kind," Shayla agreed, standing to accept her mentor's congratulatory embrace. "I have someone who wants to meet you," Dr. Winters said, gesturing to an Asian man in his 50s, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit. "Shayla Thompson, meet Robert Chen of Aurora Ventures. He's the angel investor I told you about." Shayla's heart skipped. Dr. Winters had mentioned this possibility, an introduction to a potential investor interested in her food redistribution concept, but she hadn't dared hope it would materialize so quickly. "It's an honor, Mr. Chen," she began, extending her hand professionally despite her inner nervousness. Before she could continue, Faith tugged insistently at her gown. "Mommy, Destiny needs the bathroom." "Right now," emphasized Hope, the designated spokesperson for emergencies. Robert Chen's eyes crinkled with amusement as he took in the scene, the new graduate with 3 determined toddlers anchored to her legs. "Perhaps we could schedule a proper meeting next week," Shayla suggested, professional composure warring with maternal reality. "Absolutely," Chen replied easily. "Dr. Winters speaks very highly of both you and your concept. I look forward to seeing your business plan." As she navigated the crowded bathroom with 3 toddlers, helping each one while keeping the others from touching every surface, Shayla mentally calculated how many hours it would take to polish her business plan to investor standards. She'd been refining it between feedings and bedtime stories for months, but presenting to a real investor required perfection. 2 weeks later, Shayla sat across from Robert Chen in a sleek conference room, a stark contrast to her usual environments of university classrooms and playground benches. She'd spent every spare moment preparing, practicing her pitch while folding laundry, rehearsing answers to potential questions while cooking dinner, perfecting her spreadsheets during the quiet hours after the girls finally slept. The triple stroller parked beside her contained her daughters, miraculously napping simultaneously after a morning at the park designed to tire them out for this exact window of opportunity. "I apologize for having to bring them," Shayla said, gesturing to the sleeping children. "Our usual sitter had an emergency." Chen waved away her concern. "I raised 3 children myself, though not all at once. Please, begin whenever you're ready." Taking a deep breath, Shayla launched into her presentation. FoodShare addresses 2 critical problems simultaneously: the 40% of food wasted by restaurants and grocers daily, and the 17% of Boston residents experiencing food insecurity. As she moved through her slides, explaining the mobile platform that would connect food businesses with excess inventory to shelters and community organizations, Chen listened intently, interrupting occasionally with insightful questions. His expression revealed nothing until she reached her financial projections. "These numbers," he said, tapping the growth curve on her handout, "they're conservative given the market opportunity." "I preferred realistic projections over optimistic ones," Shayla explained. "The social impact is my primary motivation, but I've structured the business to be self-sustaining within 18 months through our subscription model for participating businesses." Chen nodded slowly, making notes. "Most social entrepreneurs lead with heart over business sense. You appear to have both in equal measure." As if on cue, Destiny stirred and opened her eyes, regarding Chen with solemn curiosity. "Are you going to help my mommy's food business?" she asked directly, demonstrating the precociousness that often startled adults. Chen looked surprised, then genuinely amused. "That's what we're discussing, yes." "Good," Destiny declared, "because mommy works very hard and her idea will help hungry people." Shayla felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment, but Chen seemed charmed by the child's advocacy. "Out of the mouths of babes," he murmured, then turned back to Shayla with renewed interest. "Tell me, Ms. Thompson, what's your background in technology development? The app is central to your concept." This was the question she dreaded, the one that highlighted her limitations. "I've taken coding courses online, but I'm not a developer. The technical build would require either hiring expertise or partnering with a tech incubator." "Honesty. Refreshing," Chen commented, making another note. "Most entrepreneurs in your position would bluff." He closed her business plan and studied her for a long moment. "I've never seen a presentation this well prepared from someone so encumbered." He gestured toward the triplets, who were now all awake and quietly examining the unfamiliar surroundings. "It speaks to extraordinary determination." Shayla tensed, waiting for the inevitable rejection wrapped in compliments. She'd heard this pattern before: praise followed by "unfortunately" or "however." "Aurora Ventures would like to offer you $50,000 in seed funding for a 20% equity stake in FoodShare," Chen stated instead, his voice matter of fact. "Contingent upon your agreement to work with a technical co-founder we'll help you identify." The words took a moment to register. "You're investing in FoodShare? In me?" "I'm investing in the most prepared, focused founder I've met this year," Chen corrected. "The fact that you've accomplished this level of work while raising triplets alone tells me you have the persistence entrepreneurship requires." As the reality sank in, Shayla fought to maintain her professional demeanor despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "Thank you, Mr. Chen. I won't disappoint you." "I believe that," he replied simply. "Now, let's discuss next steps while your impressive advocates here are still behaving." The following months passed in a whirlwind of development. With Chen's guidance, Shayla partnered with a technical co-founder, Jamie Reeves, a recent MIT graduate who believed in the vision of FoodShare. They worked primarily from Shayla's apartment, which gradually transformed into a startup headquarters. Whiteboards covered in flowcharts, laptops surrounded by children's toys, investor meetings conducted over the happy chaos of preschoolers. "We need to simplify the onboarding process for restaurants," Jamie explained one evening, gesturing to the wireframes on his screen while stepping carefully over Hope's building blocks. "The easier we make it, the higher our adoption rate." "What if we create templates based on restaurant type?" Shayla suggested, simultaneously helping Faith with a juice box. "Fast food will have different excess patterns than fine dining." As they built the first version of the application, Shayla's living room became a revolving door of developers, designers, and advisors. The children adapted to this strange new normal with remarkable flexibility, often sitting in on meetings with coloring books, absorbing business terminology that would later surprise their preschool teachers. "My mommy's MVP needs user testing," Destiny announced during show and tell, to her teacher's confusion. In August, Shayla hosted a small launch party in her apartment to celebrate FoodShare's beta version. Chen attended with several other potential investors, mingling comfortably among the mixture of business contacts and Shayla's support network of neighbors and university friends. "To Shayla Thompson," Chen toasted, raising a plastic cup of sparkling cider, "who proves that great vision can emerge from challenging circumstances." Later that evening, as the guests departed, Chen lingered to share news. "Whole Foods has expressed interest in piloting the program with their Boston locations. This could be your first major corporate partnership." Shayla's eyes widened. "Whole Foods? That would be transformative for us." "Indeed," Chen agreed. "They're particularly interested in the tax benefits your platform calculates for donated food. Their sustainability director will contact you next week." After he left, Shayla sat on her worn sofa, surrounded by her sleeping daughters who had finally crashed from the excitement. The contrast between this moment and where she'd been 3 years ago, abandoned, pregnant, terrified, seemed almost surreal. For the first time, the future she'd promised her daughters felt tangibly possible rather than merely defiant hope. The first year of FoodShare's operation exceeded even Shayla's carefully conservative projections. The Whole Foods partnership led to connections with other conscious retailers. A feature in the Boston Globe highlighting the app's impact on local hunger initiatives generated significant public interest. By year's end, they had connected over 50 restaurants and grocers with 23 community organizations, redirecting more than 20,000 pounds of food from landfills to people in need. "We need to hire someone to manage restaurant relationships," Shayla told Jamie during their weekly strategy meeting. They'd graduated from her living room to a small office in a shared workspace, though the girls still occasionally accompanied her when childcare arrangements fell through. "I can't keep doing site visits with our current growth rate." "Agreed," Jamie nodded, updating their hiring priorities spreadsheet. "And we should start thinking about the next funding round. Chen says we're ready for proper venture capital if our current trajectory holds." The mention of venture capital simultaneously excited and terrified Shayla. It meant growth potential but also increased scrutiny, expectations, and pressure. She'd researched the statistics. Less than 2% of venture funding went to women founders, and the percentage for Black women was vanishingly small. As if reading her thoughts, Jamie added, "You know, your story is becoming one of our strongest assets. Single mother of triplets creating a technology that's genuinely helping communities. Investors eat that narrative up." Shayla frowned slightly. "I don't want to leverage my children or our struggles for funding." "Not leveraging," Jamie clarified. "Just acknowledging that your perspective as a founder is uniquely valuable precisely because it's not the standard privileged tech bro story." Later that week, Shayla was invited to speak at a local entrepreneurship event. As she prepared the girls for the evening, their first public appearance as the FoodShare family, she carefully explained what would happen. "People might take our picture and they'll ask Mommy about the food app," she told them as she braided Hope's hair. "You three just need to be your wonderful selves." "Can I talk about the food waste statistics?" asked Destiny seriously, having memorized several facts from overhearing countless pitches. Shayla laughed. "Maybe let Mommy handle the statistics tonight." At the event, Shayla was surprised to find herself featured prominently in the program. When she took the stage, the moderator introduced her as the rising star of Boston's social enterprise scene. The audience, primarily composed of business students and local entrepreneurs, listened attentively as she explained FoodShare's mission and technology. "What inspired you to create this solution?" the moderator asked. Shayla paused, considering her answer carefully. "Necessity," she finally said. "When you're struggling to feed your own family while witnessing massive food waste in your workplace, the inefficiency becomes impossible to ignore. The best innovations often come from those experiencing the problems firsthand." Afterward, several attendees approached her with business cards and questions. Among them was a reporter from the local newspaper, interested in featuring FoodShare in a series about innovative startups. "Would you be comfortable with a photo of you and your daughters for the piece?" the reporter asked. "Your story as a single-mother entrepreneur is compelling." Shayla hesitated, protective instincts flaring. "I'd prefer the focus stay on the technology and its impact." "Of course," the reporter assured her. "But readers connect with human stories. Your journey from waitress to founder while raising triplets exemplifies the perseverance entrepreneurs need." Eventually, Shayla agreed to a compromise, a professional photo with the girls that focused on their family's relationship to the mission rather than their personal struggles. The resulting article, published the following Sunday, included a warm image of Shayla with her daughters at a food bank served by FoodShare. The headline read, "Local Mom's Tech Solution Fights Hunger While Building Business." The piece briefly mentioned her background as a single mother who had worked restaurant jobs while completing her degree, presenting it as the inspiration behind FoodShare's mission rather than a sob story. To her relief, it emphasized the business's innovative approach and early success, rather than dwelling on personal hardships. What Shayla couldn't have anticipated was who might be reading that Sunday paper, or how the seeds of her future empire were already taking root in that small feature article mentioning her story as a single mother of triplets building a socially responsible business. While clipping that small newspaper article for her daughter's memory album, Shayla couldn't imagine that in less than a decade she would be on the cover of Forbes, with an empire valued in billions and a destiny with fate awaiting in Manhattan. While clipping that small newspaper article for her daughter's memory album, Shayla couldn't imagine that in less than a decade she would be on the cover of Forbes, with an empire valued in billions and a destiny with fate awaiting in Manhattan. The conference room at Aurora Ventures hummed with anticipation as Shayla stood before the projector screen, her presentation on FoodShare's first-year metrics displayed in clean, compelling graphics. 3 years had passed since that graduation day when Robert Chen had first offered his investment, and the transformation was remarkable, both in her business and herself. "As you can see, gentlemen," she concluded, gesturing to the final slide, "FoodShare has exceeded projections by 37%. We've connected 73 food providers with 39 community organizations, diverting over 50,000 pounds of food from landfills to people in need." Robert Chen, seated at the head of the table, nodded approvingly while the other board members murmured and made notes. No longer the nervous graduate with sleeping toddlers in tow, Shayla had developed the polished confidence of a true CEO, her voice steady, her business attire modest but professional, her data meticulously prepared. "Most impressive is the scalability model," Chen noted. "Your technology infrastructure is ready for expansion beyond Boston. The question is, are you?" Shayla smiled, having anticipated this exact question. "I've developed a phased rollout plan for the next 5 cities, prioritized by food waste statistics and existing community partnerships." She distributed a supplementary document. "With the right funding, we can be operational in Chicago and Los Angeles within 6 months." The presentation concluded with unanimous approval for pursuing a Series A funding round of $1 million, 20 times her initial investment. As the board members filed out, Chen lingered behind, his expression thoughtful. "You've built something remarkable here, Shayla," he said. "Not just the technology, but the entire ecosystem. Most founders with your traction would be seeking acquisition by now." Shayla shook her head firmly. FoodShare isn't built to be absorbed by some tech giant that might shelve our mission. We're playing a longer game." Chen smiled knowingly. "That's what I hoped you'd say. The investors I'm introducing you to next week feel the same way. They're looking for vision, not just quick returns." Outside the gleaming office building, Shayla checked her watch, just enough time to make it to the girls' elementary school for pickup. At 6 years old, the triplets were now in first grade, their individual personalities blossoming in ways that constantly amazed her. When she arrived at the school playground, the familiar sight of her daughters lifted the weight of business concerns from her shoulders. Destiny sat cross-legged under a tree, intensely focused on a book about space that seemed too advanced for her age. Hope, always social, was organizing some elaborate game with classmates, her hands gesturing animatedly. Faith stood apart, mediating what appeared to be a dispute between two other children, her expression serious beyond her years. "Mommy!" Hope spotted her first, abandoning her game to race across the playground. The others followed quickly, 3 distinct versions of the same beautiful face lighting up with joy. That evening in their small but comfortable apartment, a significant upgrade from the Dorchester studio but still modest by Boston standards, Shayla helped with homework while simultaneously reviewing investment proposals on her laptop. The girls had grown accustomed to sharing their mother with her growing business, understanding in their childlike way that her work was building their future. "Ms. Garcia said I should enter the state math competition," Destiny announced, pushing her completed worksheet aside. "She says I'm doing 5th grade math already." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Shayla responded, making a mental note to speak with the teacher about additional enrichment opportunities. Destiny's mathematical aptitude had become increasingly evident, demanding challenges beyond the standard curriculum. Hope looked up from her drawing. "I finished my art project for the school display. Ms. Wilson said it might win a prize." Shayla examined the colorful creation, a surprisingly sophisticated depiction of people sharing food at a community table. "It's beautiful, Hope. You've captured exactly what FoodShare is about." Faith, always the most observant, studied her mother's face. "You look tired, Mommy. Did your business meeting go okay?" "It went very well," Shayla assured her, touched by her daughter's perceptiveness. "We're going to grow bigger soon, which means more work, but also more opportunity." Later, after tucking the girls into bed with their nightly ritual of stories and affirmations, Shayla sat at her kitchen table surrounded by spreadsheets and business plans. The pending Series A funding would transform FoodShare from a promising local startup to a legitimate contender in the food technology space. The responsibility was enormous, not just to her investors and employees, but to her daughters, whose future security depended on her success. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of pitches to potential investors. Shayla refined her presentation after each meeting, addressing concerns and emphasizing advantages with increasing skill. Jamie, her technical co-founder, marveled at her evolution. "You realize you've become a completely different person in these investor rooms?" he commented after a particularly successful pitch. "It's like watching a transformation. You walk in and just own the space." Shayla considered this as they waited for their ride. "Not different," she corrected. "Just uncovered. This version of me was always there, beneath the doubt and fear." The breakthrough came on a rainy Tuesday when a venture capital firm specializing in social enterprises committed $500,000. By Friday, 3 more investors had joined, completing the $1 million round. FoodShare, soon to be rebranded as Resilience Foods, had secured the capital needed for national expansion. The company grew rapidly over the next 12 months. New hires filled the expanded office space. Development teams built more sophisticated versions of the platform. Sales representatives signed partnerships with restaurant chains and grocery conglomerates. Shayla's days became a blur of strategy sessions, investor updates, and recruitment interviews. Through it all, she maintained her commitment to being present for her daughter's milestones. She rearranged executive meetings to attend school performances, took conference calls from soccer sidelines, and designated Sundays as sacred family time. regardless of business demands. "How do you balance it all?" asked a new employee, a mother herself, observing Shayla seamlessly transition from a budget meeting to a video call with Destiny's science teacher. "I don't," Shayla admitted candidly. "Some days the business gets shortchanged. Some days the girls do. The trick is making sure nothing important gets missed on either side." This philosophy extended to her hiring practices. Resilience Foods became known for its family-friendly policies, flexible hours, remote work options, and an office environment where employees' children were welcome in emergencies. The result was fierce loyalty from a team that included many parents returning to the workforce after raising children. As the company's profile rose, so did media interest in its founder's story. Shayla carefully navigated interview requests, agreeing only to those focused on the business rather than her personal journey. She had no interest in becoming a media personality or having her daughter's privacy invaded. When the girls did appear at company events, it was on their terms and with clear boundaries. One spring afternoon, Shayla was reviewing expansion plans for the Chicago office when her assistant interrupted with a magazine. "The new issue of Business Innovators just arrived," she said, placing it on the desk. "You're mentioned in their Entrepreneurs Revolutionizing Traditional Industries feature." Shayla flipped to the article, scanning its profiles of disruptive founders. The piece about Resilience Foods was substantial, a full page describing their technology platform and impact metrics. A small photo showed her speaking at a recent conference, looking confident in a simple but elegant blazer, her natural hair styled professionally. What caught her eye, however, was another profile several pages later. Under Financial Sector Innovators was a familiar face. Dylan Miller, founder of a new boutique investment firm called Miller Ventures. The photo showed him in an expensive suit, leaning casually against a sleek desk, the Manhattan skyline visible through floor-to-ceiling windows behind him. Miller Ventures specializes in early-stage investments for traditional sectors seeking digital transformation, the caption read. Founder Dylan Miller, Harvard Business School alum, brings old money wisdom to new market opportunities. Shayla stared at the image, a complex wave of emotions washing over her. He looked older, of course, fine lines around his eyes, a touch of distinguished gray at his temples, but still carried that unmistakable air of entitled confidence. The article praised his meteoric rise in New York financial circles and impeccable social connections that gave his firm an edge with elite clients. "You're not sophisticated enough," his voice echoed from the past. "You don't have the connections, the education, or the background I need." She closed the magazine, her jaw tightening. Those words had once cut her to the core. Now they fueled a quiet determination. While Dylan had leveraged family connections and social privilege to build his venture, she had created something from nothing, overcoming obstacles he couldn't begin to comprehend. That evening, Shayla arrived home to find Faith sitting thoughtfully at the dining table, her homework spread before her. "What's on your mind, Faith?" Shayla asked, recognizing her daughter's contemplative expression. "We had career day at school," Faith explained. "Many parents talked about their jobs. David's dad is a banker who works on Wall Street. He wears expensive suits and makes lots of money." Shayla felt a peculiar tension, waiting for where this observation might lead. "Then I told everyone what you do," Faith continued, "how you built technology that helps hungry people get food that would be wasted, how you employ people who couldn't get jobs other places." "And?" Shayla prompted gently. "Everyone thought it was amazing. Even David's dad asked me questions afterward." Faith looked up with serious eyes. "Our family doesn't have a dad, but we have something better. We have you, and you're building something important." Tears threatened, but Shayla blinked them back. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means more than you know." 2 weeks later, an email arrived that would chart their next course. The subject line read, "Techstars Accelerator Program, Invitation to Apply." The prestigious startup accelerator in New York offered mentorship, connections, and potential funding that could catapult Resilience Foods to the next level. Shayla gathered the girls for a family meeting that evening, explaining the opportunity and what it might mean. "If we're accepted, we would need to move to New York for 3 months," she explained carefully. "It would mean a new school for you, temporarily, but it could help our company grow much bigger." "Would we live in a skyscraper?" Hope asked, eyes wide with excitement. "Not exactly," Shayla laughed. "Probably a small apartment in Brooklyn." Faith, ever practical, had more substantive questions. "Would we come back to Boston afterward? What about our friends?" "That depends on how things go," Shayla answered honestly. "It might make sense to keep a small office in New York if we make the right connections there." Destiny, who had been quietly absorbing the information, spoke up. "New York has better math and science programs. I researched it." Shayla smiled at her eldest by 2 minutes, unsurprised that she'd already investigated educational opportunities. "Yes, it does have excellent schools." The decision wasn't made lightly. Moving to New York meant entering Dylan's territory, the financial world where Miller Ventures operated. Though Boston was small enough that their paths might have crossed, their social and professional orbits remained sufficiently distinct to avoid encounters. Manhattan represented a different risk entirely. Yet the potential benefits outweighed these concerns. Techstars could provide the mentorship, connections, and visibility needed to secure more substantial funding and partnerships. After discussing it with her board and her daughters, Shayla submitted the application. When the acceptance came a month later, it arrived with an unexpected bonus. Techstars had partnered with a private academy that would provide scholarships for the girls during their stay. "It seems the universe is aligning in our favor," Chen remarked when Shayla shared the news. As she packed their belongings for the move to New York, Hope's innocent question caught Shayla off guard. "Do you think we might meet our dad someday?" Shayla's hands stilled over the suitcase. The girls occasionally asked about their father, but usually in abstract terms. They knew only that he hadn't been ready to be a parent and had chosen not to be part of their lives. "I don't know, sweetheart," she answered carefully. "He lives in New York, but it's a very big city." "Would you be mad if we wanted to meet him?" Faith asked, demonstrating her usual emotional intelligence. Shayla sat on the edge of the bed, drawing her daughters close. "I would never be mad about that. If someday you want to know him, that will be your choice to make." What she didn't say was how the thought of Dylan meeting these extraordinary children, seeing what he had discarded, witnessing the remarkable beings they had become without his involvement, filled her with a complicated satisfaction that wasn't quite vindication, but wasn't entirely free of it either. While packing their belongings for the move to New York, Shayla didn't know that she was inching geographically closer to Dylan's territory, whose own investment empire was beginning to gain notoriety on Wall Street, an inevitable encounter that fate was silently orchestrating. While packing their belongings for the move to New York, Shayla didn't know that she was inching geographically closer to Dylan's territory, whose own investment empire was beginning to gain notoriety on Wall Street, an inevitable encounter that fate was silently orchestrating. The bustling energy of Manhattan hit Shayla and the girls like a physical wave as they emerged from Penn Station 3 weeks later. Towering skyscrapers stretched toward the clouds, yellow taxis weaved aggressively through traffic, and the sidewalks pulsed with humanity moving at that distinctively urgent New York pace. "It's like a giant anthill," exclaimed Hope, her artistic eye immediately captivated by the urban tableau. Shayla gripped their hands tightly, navigating through the crowd toward their waiting car. "Stay close, girls. New York moves faster than Boston." Their temporary home was a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn, small by Boston standards but extravagant by New York ones. The Techstars program had arranged it within walking distance of the girls' new school and a reasonable commute to the accelerator's Manhattan workspace. "It's cozy," Faith observed diplomatically as they explored the space, always the first to find the positive angle. Destiny immediately claimed the small desk by the window, already planning where she would set up her books and the refurbished laptop Shayla had purchased for her last birthday. "The Wi-Fi speed is 3 times faster than at home," she noted with approval, having already tested it with her tablet. The Techstars program began with intensity that matched the city itself. Shayla found herself immersed in workshops, mentoring sessions, and networking events that stretched from early morning until late evening. The caliber of expertise surrounding her was simultaneously intimidating and exhilarating. Industry leaders who had built and sold multiple companies now freely offered advice on scaling Resilience Foods. "Your technology has genuine potential to disrupt food distribution globally," commented her assigned mentor, a serial entrepreneur who had sold his last company to Google. "But your current infrastructure won't support the growth you're projecting." These conversations pushed Shayla to think bigger than she ever had. What had begun as a simple app connecting restaurants with food banks was evolving into a comprehensive platform that could transform the entire food supply chain, reducing waste while addressing food insecurity on a massive scale. The girls, meanwhile, thrived in their new educational environment. The private academy catered to gifted children, offering the kind of specialized attention and advanced curriculum that Shayla could never have afforded under normal circumstances. "Destiny solved a mathematical problem today that impressed even our 8th grade teacher," the school principal informed Shayla during their first parent-teacher conference. "Her analytical abilities are quite extraordinary." Similar reports followed for Hope and Faith, Hope's artistic talents drawing special notice from the arts faculty, while Faith's persuasive speaking skills had already earned her a spot on the debate team despite her young age. One evening, after a particularly successful pitch practice session, Shayla treated the girls to dinner at a modest Italian restaurant in their Brooklyn neighborhood. As they waited for their pasta, she marveled at how seamlessly they had adapted to New York life, already sounding like miniature city dwellers with opinions on subway lines and neighborhood parks. "I had to explain algorithmic distribution models to my classmates today," Destiny announced casually, arranging her silverware in perfect geometric alignment. "They didn't understand how resilience predicts food surplus patterns." Shayla nearly choked on her water. "You explained what?" "I've been listening to your practice pitches," Destiny shrugged. "The statistical models are actually quite elegant." Hope, twirling a breadstick like a baton, added, "I drew your supply chain for art class. Ms. Brennan said it showed remarkable spatial reasoning and systems thinking." Faith, ever the observer, smiled quietly. "Our class had to write about heroes for social studies. I wrote about you, about building a company that helps people while raising us without a father." Shayla reached across the table to squeeze Faith's hand, emotion tightening her throat. "That's very sweet, sweetheart. But you know you never have to explain our family to anyone." "I'm not explaining," Faith replied with surprising firmness. "I'm celebrating. David's dad just makes money. You make money and help people and raise us. That's much harder." These moments of clarity from her daughters, glimpses of the remarkable women they were becoming, sustained Shayla through the grueling Techstars program. By the halfway point, Resilience Foods had been highlighted as one of the cohort's most promising companies, attracting attention from investors and potential corporate partners. 3 months into their New York adventure, Shayla sat in her small Brooklyn living room reviewing partnership proposals after the girls had gone to bed. A notification on her tablet alerted her to a new Wall Street Journal article. "Miller Ventures launches $100 million fund targeting food innovation sector." Her finger hovered over the link, heart suddenly racing. Opening the article revealed Dylan's familiar face. Older now, his boyish good looks matured into the polished appearance of a successful financier. He stood confidently before the Miller Ventures logo, his custom suit and carefully styled hair projecting exactly the sophisticated image he had once told Shayla she could never match. Miller Ventures founder Dylan Miller announced the new fund at the Plaza Hotel yesterday, describing it as targeting traditional food industry players seeking technological transformation, the article read. With this specialized fund, Miller extends his firm's reach into the rapidly evolving food technology space, competing with established venture capital firms for access to promising startups. The timing couldn't have been more ironic. Dillon was now investing in exactly the sector where Resilience Foods was gaining recognition. The very man who had dismissed Shayla as insufficient was now positioning himself in her professional territory. Her phone rang, startling her from these thoughts. It was Chen. "I assume you've seen the Miller announcement," he said without preamble. "Just reading it now," Shayla confirmed, keeping her voice neutral. "This might actually work in our favor," Chen mused. "Having another high-profile fund enter the food tech space validates our market timing. But more importantly, I wanted to warn you, his firm will be at the Techstars demo day next month." The implications hit her immediately. Demo Day was the culmination of the Accelerator program, where each company pitched to a room full of investors and media. If Miller Ventures was attending, Dillon would likely be there. "I appreciate the heads up," she said carefully. "It's a big industry. I'm sure there's room for multiple players." After hanging up, Shayla found herself drawn to the window, looking out over the Brooklyn skyline toward Manhattan's glittering towers. Somewhere in that constellation of lights was Dillon, probably working late in some sleek office, completely unaware that the woman and children he had discarded as inconvenient to his ambitions were now just across the river. The next day brought unexpected news that pushed thoughts of Dillon temporarily aside. A major retail corporation had offered Resilience Foods $250 million for acquisition, an amount that would make Shayla and her early investors wealthy beyond their expectations. "It's an incredible offer," admitted her Techstars mentor during an emergency advisory session. "5 times your current valuation, with guaranteed roles for your executive team." Jamie, who had flown in from Boston for the meeting, seemed inclined toward acceptance. "This is the kind of exit most founders dream about, Shayla. We'd be acquired by one of the largest retailers in the world, with resources to scale our platform nationally overnight." Shayla studied the offer document carefully, focusing on the proposed governance structure. "They want to integrate our technology into their existing systems and appoint me as Vice President of Sustainability Initiatives," she noted. "Not CEO, not even Division President. That's standard in acquisitions of this size," her lawyer explained. "The founding team typically transitions to executive roles within the parent company." "They're buying our technology and our team," Shayla said slowly, the realization crystallizing as she spoke. "But they're also acquiring our mission and our vision, which they can reshape or even abandon as corporate priorities change." The room fell silent as everyone recognized the central question. Was this about building personal wealth, or about maintaining control of the mission she had created? Later that evening, Shayla discussed the offer with the only advisors whose opinions truly mattered to her: her daughters. Sitting in their small living room, she explained the situation in terms they could understand. "A very big company wants to buy Mommy's business," she told them. "If I say yes, we would have a lot more money. We could buy a nice house instead of renting. You could have many things we can't afford now." "Would you still be the boss?" Faith asked perceptively. "No," Shayla admitted. "I would work for them, helping run the food program, but not making all the decisions anymore." Destiny, always focused on long-term consequences, frowned. "But if you're not in charge, they might change how it works. They might not care about helping hungry people as much as making money." "That's possible," Shayla acknowledged, impressed by her daughter's insight. Hope, who had been quietly listening, asked the simplest but most profound question. "Does selling your company make you happy, Mommy?" The question cut through all the complex financial and strategic considerations to the heart of the matter. Shayla had built Resilience Foods not just as a business but as a manifestation of her values. Efficiency, compassion, and empowerment combined into a system that helped both businesses and vulnerable communities. "No," she answered honestly. "I don't think it would make me happy to give up control of what we're building." The next day, Shayla declined the offer, politely but firmly. While we appreciate the generous valuation, Resilience Foods is pursuing a long-term independent growth strategy, she wrote in her response. We believe our mission is best served by maintaining our autonomy at this stage. Some board members questioned her decision, but Chen supported her firmly. $250 million is impressive today, he acknowledged. But I believe Shayla is building a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. Sometimes the best deals are the ones you walk away from. As demo day approached, Resilience Foods prepared for a different kind of debut, not as an acquisition target but as an emerging industry leader seeking strategic partners and growth capital. Shayla worked tirelessly, refining her presentation until each slide, each statistic, each word reflected the perfect balance of ambition and proven execution. The night before the big event, she stood before the mirror in her bedroom, practicing her pitch one final time. The confident, articulate woman who stared back bore little resemblance to the devastated pregnant student Dylan had dismissed all those years ago. Her simple but elegant blazer, her carefully styled natural hair, her clear voice filled with authority, these were the attributes of someone who belonged in any boardroom in America. "You're not sophisticated enough," Dylan's voice echoed from the past. Those words, once wounds, had transformed into fuel, propelling her through every obstacle, every doubt, every closed door. Tomorrow, she would stand on stage before hundreds of investors, industry leaders, and media representatives, possibly including Dylan himself, and demonstrate just how wrong he had been. As the girls slept peacefully in the next room, Shayla opened her laptop one last time to review the investor prospectus. The document detailed Resilience Foods' technology, market position, and growth projections. The final page included the executive team profiles, with Shayla's photo and biography prominently featured. Shayla Thompson, founder and CEO, it read, built Resilience Foods from concept to multi-city operation, securing partnerships with major food retailers and distribution networks. Graduate of Boston University, single mother to triplet daughters. Named Emerging Entrepreneur of the Year by Boston Business Journal. Each word was factual yet powerful, a testament to what she had built while raising 3 children alone. If Dylan did attend tomorrow, this would be his introduction to the woman he had once deemed insufficient for his world. Recusing the acceptance letter that would have changed her life, Shayla didn't know that her decision initiated a trajectory that, in just 5 years, would put Resilience Foods on a direct collision course with Miller Ventures, in a confrontation that would shake Wall Street and rewrite the destiny of both. Recusing the acceptance letter that would have changed her life, Shayla didn't know that her decision initiated a trajectory that, in just 5 years, would put Resilience Foods on a direct collision course with Miller Ventures, in a confrontation that would shake Wall Street and rewrite the destiny of both. The Singapore sun blazed through floor-to-ceiling windows as Shayla Thompson adjusted her presentation on the tablet before her. Outside, the iconic skyline of Marina Bay shimmered in the tropical heat, a world away from the Boston streets where she had once juggled 3 jobs while pregnant with triplets. "The Indonesian minister confirms he'll join us for dinner," her assistant reported, offering a glass of water. "His government is particularly interested in implementing our distribution system across Jakarta's food deserts." Shayla nodded, taking a sip before returning to the projected figures on her screen. "Make sure the sustainability team prepares the localization metrics for tropical climates. Their food waste patterns differ significantly from our Western models." At 33, Shayla had transformed from a struggling single mother to a global business leader. Resilience Foods, now valued at over $100 million, operated in 12 countries across 3 continents. The company she had built from a simple app connecting restaurants with food banks had evolved into a technological ecosystem that revolutionized how food moved from producers to consumers, dramatically reducing waste while increasing access for underserved communities. The teleconference began precisely on time, with team members from London, São Paulo, Boston, and Delhi appearing in separate windows on the massive display. Each regional director presented their quarterly results, highlighted challenges, and proposed solutions, all reporting ultimately to Shayla, whose quiet authority guided the hour-long global strategy session. Toronto implementation is running 2 weeks ahead of schedule, reported her Canadian operations manager. The municipal government is already requesting expansion to 3 additional districts based on early results. As the meeting concluded, Shayla's finance director remained online for a private conversation. The Series C funding round is oversubscribed, she informed Shayla with barely contained excitement. We've had to cap participation. At this valuation, your founder's equity is now worth approximately $27 million, Shayla. The number hung in the air between them, an almost unfathomable sum for someone who had once counted pennies for baby formula. Shayla maintained her professional composure, but beneath it, a quiet satisfaction bloomed. Financial security for her daughters had been her first goal, now achieved beyond any reasonable expectation. Allocate the additional investor interest to the Impact Fund, she decided. I want to increase our subsidies for small farms in developing markets. Later that afternoon, Shayla's private car navigated Singapore's immaculate streets toward Changi Airport, where the company's chartered jet waited. She used the drive to video call home, where it was still early morning in Boston. The triplets, now 10 years old, appeared on screen in their school uniforms, their faces bright despite the early hour. They had remained in Boston with Mrs. Martinez during Shayla's 2-week Asia trip, a necessary separation that technology made more bearable. "Mom, did you see the science project results?" Destiny's face filled the screen first, barely containing her excitement. "I won first place! The judges said my solar desalination model could actually work in real-world applications." "That's incredible, sweetheart. I'm so proud of you," Shayla beamed, genuinely thrilled despite the exhaustion of her travel schedule. "I'll be home tomorrow to hear all about it." Hope pushed her way into frame. "My painting got selected for the school entrance. It'll be the first thing visitors see when they come in." "And I won my debate competition," Faith added more calmly, though her eyes shone with equal pride. The topic was whether technology companies have ethical responsibilities beyond profit. I argued yes, obviously. Each achievement, each milestone reached by her daughters fueled Shayla's conviction that every sacrifice had been worthwhile. The girls attended the prestigious Cambridge Academy on academic scholarships, their natural talents flourishing under exceptional teaching and resources that Shayla's success had made accessible. Yet despite her company's valuation and global footprint, Shayla maintained a relatively modest lifestyle. Their home, while comfortable, was far from ostentatious. A 3-bedroom condo in a good Boston neighborhood rather than the mansion her wealth could easily afford. She drove a practical luxury sedan rather than a flashy sports car. The girls had quality clothing and educational resources but weren't showered with extravagance. This deliberate restraint sometimes puzzled her investors, who expected the founder of a rapidly scaling tech company to indulge in more visible trappings of success. "Most of our profits are reinvested in expansion," she explained when questioned about her conservative financial approach. "I'm building something sustainable, not extracting maximum personal benefit in the short term." What she didn't articulate was the deeper truth, that security, not luxury, was her driving force. Every dollar saved was insurance against the vulnerability she had once known, a buffer protecting her daughters from ever experiencing the desperation of their early years. Upon returning to Boston, Shayla's first morning back began in the expansive corner office that occupied the 32nd floor of a downtown high-rise. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view that, on clear days, included the Roxbury neighborhood where she had grown up. This visual reminder of her journey was intentional, a daily perspective on how far she had come and why her mission mattered. 3 framed photographs adorned her otherwise minimalist desk. The girls as newborns in the NICU, at age 5 on their first day of kindergarten, and their most recent school portrait, three increasingly distinct versions of a face that sometimes revealed hints of their father's features. "The architectural plans for the new headquarters are ready for your review," her executive assistant announced, placing a large portfolio on her desk. "The design team incorporated your request for the community kitchen and urban farm components." Resilience Foods' planned headquarters represented Shayla's vision perfectly, a sustainable building in a formerly neglected Boston neighborhood, incorporating affordable housing units, community food resources, and educational facilities alongside corporate offices. That afternoon, Shayla met with her chief financial officer and legal team to discuss a series of potential acquisitions that would strengthen Resilience's market position. "This logistics company would integrate perfectly with our distribution model," her CFO explained, highlighting key metrics on the presentation. "Their cold chain technology would solve several challenges we're facing in tropical markets." Shayla nodded, making notes as each opportunity was presented. The meeting progressed efficiently until the last slide appeared on screen, a potential competitor analysis. "Miller Ventures has been increasingly active in our sector," the market analyst explained, bringing Shayla's attention sharply into focus. "They've invested heavily in several adjacent technologies, particularly in the restaurant inventory management space." There on the screen was Dillon's company logo, alongside metrics detailing Miller Ventures' recent market moves. Though Shayla had occasionally seen mentions of his company in industry publications, this was the first time their business interests had directly overlapped. "Are they considering direct competition with our platform?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral. "Not yet, but their investment pattern suggests they're assembling capabilities that could eventually constitute a competing ecosystem," the analyst replied. "They recently acquired a predictive analytics firm that specializes in consumer food purchasing behavior." Shayla absorbed this information with outward calm, though her mind raced with implications. Was it possible that after all these years her path might cross with Dillon's in a professional context? The thought was simultaneously unsettling and oddly satisfying. "Monitor their acquisitions closely," she instructed. "I want to be notified of any moves that might impact our market position." That evening, as Shayla helped the girls with homework at their dining table, Faith looked up from her social studies assignment with a thoughtful expression. "Mom, do rich people have a responsibility to help others who aren't rich?" The question, coming after Shayla's earlier thoughts about Dillon, struck a particular chord. "I believe they do," she answered carefully. "Those with resources have the power to create positive change. With privilege comes responsibility." Faith nodded, writing something in her notebook. "That's what I thought. I'm writing about ethical wealth for my essay." Destiny, working through advanced mathematics problems, interjected without looking up. "Statistical evidence shows that wealth distribution follows a Pareto principle. The richest 20% control roughly 80% of resources." "Which isn't fair," added Hope from behind her sketchbook. "My art teacher says creative thinking gets less funding than business subjects, even though innovation often comes from creativity." Listening to her daughter's sophisticated observations, Shayla felt a surge of pride that transcended even her business accomplishments. These three remarkable young minds, developing in such distinct directions yet sharing core values of justice and innovation, represented her true legacy. Later that week, Shayla received an unexpected delivery to her office, a heavyweight cream envelope bearing an embossed gold seal. Inside was an invitation to speak at Harvard Business School's annual entrepreneurship conference. "They specifically requested you for the keynote on technology solutions for social impact," her assistant explained. "It's quite prestigious." Harvard, the institution that had once represented Dillon's ticket to the future he couldn't imagine including Shayla or his children. Now they were inviting her as an exemplar of business success and social responsibility. The irony wasn't lost on her. She accepted the invitation with a brief professional email, giving no indication of the personal significance attached to the prestigious university. The day of the Harvard address, Shayla stood at the podium in a tailored Armani suit, surveying the packed auditorium of business students, faculty, and industry leaders. Her presentation, detailing how Resilience Foods had created profitable solutions to entrenched social problems, was received with enthusiastic applause. Afterward, the dean himself approached. "Ms. Thompson, your company's growth trajectory is remarkable. We'd love to develop a case study on Resilience Foods for our curriculum." "I'd be honored," Shayla replied, maintaining her composed smile while inwardly appreciating the full-circle moment. The institution that had given Dylan the credentials to reject her as unsuitable was now studying her business as a model for future leaders. The following morning, Shayla was reviewing acquisition documents when her assistant interrupted. "You've been selected for Forbes' 50 Most Powerful Women in Business issue. They want to schedule a photo shoot and interview next week." The magazine feature represented another milestone, recognition not just of Resilience Foods' success, but of Shayla's personal journey as a business leader. The photo shoot took place in her office, with the Boston skyline serving as backdrop. The photographer, accustomed to working with executives who required extensive direction, seemed pleasantly surprised by Shayla's natural poise. "You carry yourself with remarkable confidence," he commented between shots. "Necessity taught me that," she replied simply. When the magazine was published 3 weeks later, Shayla found herself in distinguished company. CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, founders of tech unicorns, finance pioneers. The article highlighted Resilience Foods' innovative technology and rapid growth, but also noted her unorthodox path to success. Thompson's approach to business leadership was forged through personal challenges, the profile read. Building a tech company while raising triplet daughters as a single mother informed her unique perspective on efficiency, resource allocation, and purpose-driven growth. That evening, as Shayla helped the girls with homework, Destiny noticed the magazine on the counter. "You look really powerful in this picture, Mom," she observed, studying the professional portrait. "Do I?" Shayla asked, genuinely curious about her daughter's perception. "Yes," Faith agreed, examining the image. "You look like someone who makes important decisions." "And your clothes are beautiful," added Hope, always attentive to aesthetic details. "That blue suit matches your confidence." The girls' observations touched Shayla deeply. They had never seen the struggling, uncertain young woman she had been when Dylan rejected her. They knew only the assured, capable leader she had become. As she tucked them into bed that night, Shayla contemplated how dramatically her life had transformed in 10 years. From counting coins for baby formula to overseeing a global enterprise. From fearing eviction to being featured in Forbes. From being deemed unsophisticated to setting industry standards. The next morning brought news that sharply redirected her thoughts. Her media monitoring service flagged a Wall Street Journal article. Miller Ventures expands portfolio with food tech acquisitions. The article detailed how Dylan Miller's investment firm had purchased several small companies in the food technology space, consolidating them into a new division focused on optimizing restaurant operations and supply chain management. A quote from Dylan outlined his vision. "The food industry remains surprisingly antiquated in its approach to inventory management and distribution. Miller Ventures sees tremendous opportunity in bringing financial discipline and technological innovation to this space." The accompanying photograph showed Dylan in his element, confident, polished, addressing a room of investors at the Plaza Hotel. His expression carried the same self-assured entitlement she remembered, though now framed by distinguished touches of gray at his temples. Shayla studied the article carefully, recognizing the strategic direction indicated by these acquisitions. Miller Ventures wasn't directly competing with Resilience Foods yet, but was clearly positioning itself within adjacent market segments. Whether Dylan realized it or not, their business trajectories were converging. Later that afternoon, in the midst of reviewing partnership proposals, Shayla's assistant delivered an unexpected message. "The Gates Foundation called. They'd like you to be a featured speaker at their annual gala next month. The event will be held at Le Bernardin in Manhattan." Manhattan, Shayla repeated softly, the city name carrying unspoken weight. The epicenter of finance. Dylan's territory. Should I accept? Her assistant prompted. Shayla considered briefly. The Gates Foundation represented precisely the kind of high-impact partnership Resilience Foods sought to develop. Being featured at their gala would open countless doors. That these doors existed in Dylan's professional backyard was merely an incidental fact. Yes, accept, she decided firmly, and arrange for the girls to join me. It's time they experienced their first New York gala. That evening, while helping the girls select outfits for an upcoming school performance, Shayla found herself unusually reflective. In accepting the invitation to the Gates event, she had made a decision that substantially increased the likelihood of eventually crossing paths with Dylan. After 15 years of building her life and company deliberately separate from his world, she was now willingly entering his sphere. "Mom, do you think I should wear the blue dress or the green one for the recital?" Hope asked, interrupting her thoughts. "The green brings out your eyes," Shayla answered automatically, then added with sudden inspiration, "Actually, what would you girls think about getting special dresses made for the New York event? Something really elegant?" Their enthusiastic response made her smile. Despite her practical approach to material possessions, this milestone deserved celebration. Her daughters would enter Manhattan society not as afterthoughts or inconveniences, but as poised young women from a successful family, a family that had thrived without the man who had deemed them unworthy of his future. As she completed the online registration for the Gates Foundation Gala, Shayla was unaware that fate had already set the stage for a momentous encounter. The event guest list, recently finalized but not yet publicized, included not only major philanthropists and tech leaders, but also representatives from prominent investment firms seeking partnerships with the foundation's global initiatives. Among them, Dylan Miller, founder and CEO of Miller Ventures. Accepting the invitation to the prestigious event, Shayla had no idea that in just weeks, the encounter she had both feared and secretly anticipated for 15 years would finally materialize, with Dylan Miller about to face the consequences of his past choices in the most public and vindicating way possible. Accepting the invitation to the prestigious event, Shayla had no idea that in just weeks, the encounter she had both feared and secretly anticipated for 15 years would finally materialize, with Dylan Miller about to face the consequences of his past choices in the most public and vindicating way possible. The sleek private jet bearing the Resilience Foods logo touched down smoothly at Teterboro Airport outside Manhattan. As the cabin door opened, Shayla checked her reflection in her phone camera one last time. Her tailored Givenchy pantsuit projected exactly the image she wanted for their arrival in New York. This wasn't the anxious student or the struggling young mother anymore. This was Shayla Thompson, CEO of a company valued at over $2 billion. "Girls, remember what we discussed about media," she reminded her daughters as they prepared to disembark. "There may be photographers." "Shoulders back, genuine smile, no peace signs," recited Hope with a theatrical sigh. "And no commenting on business matters," added Destiny, already scrolling through market updates on her tablet. "Or personal questions," Faith completed, ever mindful of boundaries. The triplets, dressed in coordinated but not identical outfits that accommodated their individual styles, followed their mother down the steps with practiced poise. At 14, they carried themselves with remarkable self-assurance, not the entitled confidence of privileged upbringing, but the quiet certainty that came from being raised by a woman who had refused to accept limitations. A sleek black Suburban waited on the tarmac, whisking them directly to the Four Seasons in Midtown Manhattan. The presidential suite had been reserved for them, not because Shayla craved luxury, but because at this level of business, certain appearances were strategic necessities. "Ms. Thompson," greeted the hotel manager personally as they entered the opulent suite. "It's an honor to have you with us. The Gates Foundation sent this welcome package for you." The elegant basket contained information about tomorrow evening's gala, including a glossy program listing the speakers and notable attendees. Shayla set it aside to review later, focusing first on getting the girls settled. Destiny, the hotel has arranged access to the Columbia University Science Library tomorrow morning as requested, she informed her oldest daughter, who beamed with anticipation. Hope, your private tour of the Metropolitan Museum is confirmed for 10. And Faith, the tour of the Southern District Court proceedings starts at 11. While the girls explored the suite with appropriate teenage excitement, Shayla's assistant conducted a virtual briefing through her tablet. The Foundation specifically wants you to address food security in developing nations during your speech, the assistant explained. And several major donors have requested private meetings afterward. Your segment is scheduled for approximately 9:15, following Bill Gates's introduction. After the briefing, Shayla finally had a moment to review the gala materials. Flipping through the elegant program with its embossed lettering, she scanned the list of attendees, CEOs, Hollywood philanthropists, tech billionaires, foundation directors. Her fingers stopped abruptly mid-page. There, listed among representatives of financial institutions, Dylan Miller, founder and CEO, Miller Ventures. The room seemed to tilt slightly as 15 years of carefully maintained distance collapsed into the certainty of tomorrow's encounter. Her suspicion that they might eventually cross paths in New York had manifested with jarring immediacy. "Mom, are you okay?" Faith appeared at her shoulder, her perceptive eyes noting the subtle change in her mother's expression. Shayla composed herself quickly. "Perfectly fine, sweetheart. Just reviewing the program for tomorrow." Faith's gaze dropped to the page, reading names with the careful attention she applied to everything. "These are important people," she observed. "Are you nervous about speaking to them?" "Not about the speech," Shayla admitted, deciding honesty was better than pretense. "But there are some people attending who I haven't seen in many years." Faith studied her mother with that penetrating gaze that sometimes made Shayla feel transparent. "You always get tense when we come to New York. Is it because of him? Our biological father?" The question hung in the air between them. Shayla had never lied to the girls about their origin, but had shared details sparingly, appropriate to their age. They knew the basic outline, that their father had been her college boyfriend who decided he wasn't ready for family responsibility when she became pregnant. They knew he had chosen his career ambitions over being in their lives, but they didn't know his name, his face, or the cruelty of his rejection. "What makes you ask that?" Shayla countered gently. Faith shrugged with a wisdom beyond her 14 years. "Statistical probability. You've mentioned he works in finance in New York. You get tense when we visit Manhattan specifically, and you just had a reaction to something in that program." Sometimes Shayla forgot how observant her daughters had become, how they absorbed information and formed connections with remarkable clarity. "There's a chance we might see him tomorrow," Shayla acknowledged. "But it's a large event, and he may not even notice us." Later that evening, after the girls had retreated to their respective rooms, Destiny to review scientific journals, Hope to sketch the city skyline from their window, Faith to prepare notes for her court visit, Shayla stood alone looking out at the glittering Manhattan landscape. Somewhere among those lights, Dylan Miller was likely preparing for the same event, utterly unaware that tomorrow would bring him face to face with the consequences of choices made 15 years ago. She wondered what he would see when he looked at her now. Would he recognize the determined young woman beneath the successful CEO? Would he see anything of himself in the daughters he'd never met? Would he feel anything at all? Her reflection in the window showed no trace of the vulnerability these thoughts stirred. Instead, she saw a woman in command of her destiny. Elegant, accomplished, formidable. Everything Dylan had once implied she could never become. The morning dawned bright and clear, bringing a flurry of activity as the Thompson women prepared for their respective engagements. Shayla attended 2 virtual board meetings before noon, approved a major sustainability initiative, and finalized her speech for the evening while the girls pursued their educational excursions. As afternoon approached, Shayla's suite transformed into a preparation zone for the evening's gala. A professional stylist arranged her hair into a sophisticated updo that complemented her features while projecting executive authority. The makeup artist enhanced her natural beauty with subtle techniques that would photograph well under the gala's lighting. The custom Dior gown she had selected, a deep navy column with architectural detailing, waited on a padded hanger. It was elegant without being flashy, expensive without being ostentatious, powerful without trying too hard. Exactly the image she wanted to project. When the girls returned from their respective adventures, bubbling with excitement about court proceedings and museum collections and university research facilities, the suite became even more animated as they prepared for their first major social event. "Do you think there will be famous people there?" Hope wondered, as her hair was styled into elegant waves. "Like actual celebrities?" "The guest list includes several film industry philanthropists," Shayla confirmed, smiling at her daughter's excitement. "But remember, we're attending for the foundation's work, not for celebrity spotting." "I'm more interested in talking to the Gates Foundation program officers," declared Destiny practically. "Their malaria prevention technology is fascinating." Faith, already dressed in a sophisticated midnight blue gown that complemented her mother's, sat quietly observing the preparations. Of the three, she remained the most thoughtful about the evening's potential significance beyond the obvious glamour. "Mom," she said during a private moment as the others were finishing dressing, "if we do see him tonight, our biological father, what should we do?" Shayla sat beside her, careful not to wrinkle either of their gowns. "That's entirely your choice, sweetheart. You don't owe him anything. Not your attention, not your time, not even acknowledgement if you don't wish to give it." Faith nodded slowly, processing this. "And you? What will you do if you see him?" "Be professional," Shayla answered simply. "This evening is about Resilience Foods and the Gates Foundation's important work, nothing else." By 7:30, the Thompson women were ready. Shayla resplendent in her navy Dior, the girls elegant in age-appropriate gowns that nevertheless spoke of taste and quality. As they descended in the private elevator to meet their waiting car, Shayla felt a curious sense of destiny, as though 15 years of hard work, sacrifice, and achievement had been leading inexorably to this evening. Le Bernardin's private event space had been transformed for the gala, with subtle lighting highlighting the contemporary art on the walls and elegant floral arrangements centering each table. The guest list was limited to 200 of the most influential figures in business, technology, and philanthropy, an intimate gathering by Manhattan social standards. Shayla and the girls were escorted to their table near the front, positioned prominently due to her speaking role. As they made their way through the room, heads turned and whispers followed. Some recognizing the CEO featured recently in Forbes, others curious about the striking young women accompanying her. "Ms. Thompson, an honor to meet you," greeted a senior program officer from the Gates Foundation. "Your work in Southeast Asia has been transformative for our food security initiatives." Similar interactions followed, foundation executives, fellow entrepreneurs, potential partners, all eager to spend a few moments with the woman who had revolutionized food distribution technology. The girls handled the attention with remarkable poise, engaging thoughtfully when addressed, demonstrating the social grace Shayla had cultivated in them alongside their academic achievements. Shayla maintained perfect composure throughout these exchanges, while her peripheral awareness remained alert for one particular face. The cocktail hour progressed, dinner was served, and still there was no sign of Dylan. Perhaps he had canceled, she thought, feeling an uncomfortable mixture of relief and disappointment. As the main course concluded, Bill Gates himself approached their table, greeting Shayla warmly. "Your technology deployment in Jakarta exceeded all our projections," he noted with characteristic precision. "We'd like to discuss expanding the model to 20 additional cities next quarter." We've been refining the platform specifically for high-density urban environments with limited cold storage infrastructure, Shayla replied. I'd be delighted to have my team present the enhanced capabilities. As they spoke, a subtle shift in the room's energy drew Shayla's attention to the entrance. A new group had arrived, Japanese businessmen in immaculate suits, accompanied by a tall American with familiar features despite the distinguished silver threading his temples. Dylan Miller had arrived. He hadn't seen her yet, occupied with introducing his Japanese companions to various attendees. Shayla maintained her conversation with Gates, but her awareness had splintered. One part engaged in discussion about food security metrics while another tracked Dylan's progress through the room. She felt rather than saw her daughters notice her distraction. Faith, always the most perceptive, followed her sightline to identify its cause, her eyes widening slightly in realization. With a subtle touch, Faith alerted her sisters, and suddenly all three were surreptitiously observing the man who had contributed half their DNA but none of their upbringing. Ms. Thompson will be speaking shortly, an event coordinator informed her, breaking the moment. If you'll prepare to move to the stage after the Foundation Director's introduction. Nodding, Shayla squeezed her daughter's hands reassuringly before moving toward the staging area. From this vantage point, she could see Dylan more clearly, still handsome in a conventional way, though stress had carved lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 15 years ago. He laughed at something one of his companions said, that same confident laugh she remembered, the sound of someone accustomed to controlling rooms and conversations. He still hadn't noticed her. The Foundation Director began her introduction, outlining Resilience Foods' global impact and Shayla's visionary leadership. As applause signaled her cue, Shayla ascended to the stage with measured grace, her navy gown catching the subtle lighting. It was at precisely this moment that Dylan's casual scan of the room stopped abruptly, his attention arrested by the woman taking command of the stage. His expression transformed in stages: casual interest, confusion, disbelieving recognition, and finally, absolute shock. Shayla felt his recognition like a physical force but didn't acknowledge it, turning instead to address the assembled dignitaries with perfect composure. Food insecurity and waste represent opposite sides of the same broken system, she began, her voice strong and assured. At Resilience Foods, we've developed technology that bridges these systemic failures, creating efficiency that benefits producers, consumers, and our planet simultaneously. As she delivered her carefully crafted speech, she was acutely aware of Dylan's unwavering stare from across the room. His Japanese companions noticed his distraction, following his gaze to the woman commanding the room's attention from the stage. For 15 minutes, Shayla held the audience captive with her presentation on global food distribution innovation, weaving technical expertise with passionate advocacy. When she concluded to enthusiastic applause, she returned to her table where the girls waited, their expressions a mixture of pride and nervous anticipation. "He's coming over," whispered Faith as Shayla took her seat. Indeed, Dylan had disengaged from his group and was making his way determinedly across the room, his expression unreadable but intense. Watching his approach, Shayla experienced a surreal moment of déjà vu, an echo of that restaurant encounter 15 years ago when he had delivered his envelope of dismissal. But now the power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. "Shayla?" Dylan stopped before their table, his voice betraying disbelief despite his attempt at casual recognition. "Shayla Thompson? What an unexpected surprise." "Dylan Miller," she replied with composed neutrality, as though acknowledging a distant professional acquaintance. "It's been quite some time." His eyes darted from her face to the elegant jewelry at her throat, the designer gown, the confident posture, all external markers of the success that had been inconceivable to him when he'd dismissed her potential. Then, inevitably, his gaze shifted to the three young women seated beside her, three variations of the same striking features, with eyes that unmistakably mirrored his own. While preparing for the gala, adjusting her elegant necklace, Shayla couldn't imagine that in the next few hours, the confrontation she both feared and secretly anticipated would become the most public and vindicating moment of her life, with Dylan Miller finally facing the consequences of his past choices. While preparing for the gala, adjusting her elegant necklace, Shayla couldn't imagine that in the next few hours, the confrontation she both feared and secretly anticipated would become the most public and vindicating moment of her life, with Dylan Miller finally facing the consequences of his past choices. The grand ballroom of Le Bernardin shimmered with understated opulence. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables adorned with orchid centerpieces, while waitstaff in crisp white jackets circulated with flutes of champagne. A string quartet played softly in the corner, providing refined ambiance as America's elite mingled before dinner. The air itself seemed rarefied, perfumed with exclusive fragrances and the intangible scent of power. Shayla Thompson entered the space with practiced confidence, her daughters following in a synchronized procession that turned heads throughout the room. Her navy Dior gown caught the light as she moved, the subtle beadwork suggesting starlight against a midnight sky. Around her neck, a simple yet stunning diamond pendant, her one indulgence to mark Resilience Foods' first billion in valuation, captured and refracted the ambient light. "Ms. Thompson, we're honored to have you," greeted the Gates Foundation director, approaching immediately. "Your recent implementation in Malaysia has our global health team absolutely buzzing." Shayla smiled warmly, transitioning seamlessly into her professional persona. "The results exceeded even our expectations. We've developed a new distribution algorithm specifically for monsoon-affected regions." As she navigated the pre-dinner reception, Shayla felt a distinct shift in how she was received compared to her early entrepreneurial days. Gone were the condescending explanations from male executives, the subtle questioning of her technical knowledge, the thinly veiled surprise at her articulation. Now, senior senators sought her input on food policy. Tech billionaires asked about her expansion strategy. A Supreme Court justice engaged her in conversation about food security as a human right. "Your speech on agricultural sustainability at the UN was quite compelling," noted a silver-haired senator, raising his glass in acknowledgement. "Especially impressive from someone who built an empire from scratch." "From scratch and against all probabilities," Shayla added with a measured smile, her daughters standing proudly beside her. The girls handled the sophisticated environment with remarkable poise. Destiny discussing quantum computing with a MIT professor, Hope engaged in conversation about neo-expressionism with a museum director, Faith debating intellectual property law with a federal judge. Each interaction reinforced what Shayla had always known. Her daughters belonged in any room, at any table, in any conversation. A subtle shift in the room's energy drew Shayla's attention to the entrance. A group of Japanese executives in impeccable suits entered, flanked by hotel staff. In their center walked a tall American man with silver-threaded dark hair, directing the proceedings with practiced authority. Dylan Miller had arrived. Shayla's pulse quickened traitorously, but her expression remained impassive. The girls, attuned to their mother's subtle cues, followed her gaze. "Mom, are you all right?" Hope whispered, concern furrowing her brow. "Perfectly," Shayla responded evenly. "I simply recognized someone unexpected." Dylan moved through the crowd with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to deference. He guided his Japanese companions toward key figures in the room, a senator here, a tech CEO there, making introductions with the smooth assurance that had always been his birthright. "Mr. Tanaka, allow me to introduce you to Senator Richardson," he said, his voice carrying across the room. "We were just discussing investment opportunities in emerging technologies." 15 years had matured his features, adding distinguished lines around his eyes and a touch of silver at his temples. But his essential Dylanness remained unchanged. That innate certainty that doors would open, that his presence was welcome, that his opinion mattered. He hadn't yet noticed Shayla across the crowded room. For several minutes, Shayla observed him discreetly while maintaining her conversations. She noted the bespoke tailoring of his tuxedo, the platinum cufflinks, the custom shoes, all markers of his continued financial success. Yet she also detected something new, a slight tightness around his mouth, a barely perceptible tension in his shoulders. Miller Ventures' recent troubles had left visible traces on its founder. Then, inevitably, their eyes met across the crowded room. The moment unfolded in slow motion. Dylan's gaze, passing casually over the gathering, suddenly stopped, returned, and fixed upon her face. His expression transformed from social pleasantry to confusion to dawning recognition. The champagne glass in his hand froze midway to his lips as his entire body seemed to still. With a murmured excuse to his companions, he began making his way through the crowd toward her, his expression a complex mixture of disbelief, curiosity, and growing awareness as his eyes darted between Shayla and the three young women at her side. "Shayla? Shayla Thompson?" he managed as he reached them, his attempt at casual recognition belied by the shock evident in his voice. "Dylan Miller," she replied coolly, as if acknowledging a distant professional acquaintance rather than the man who had once shattered her world. What a coincidence. His eyes performed a rapid assessment, taking in her elegant attire, the diamond pendant at her throat, the poised confidence that hadn't existed when he knew her. Then, inevitably, his gaze shifted to the three teenage girls standing beside her, three variations of the same striking features, with eyes unmistakably like his own staring back at him with curious intensity. "These are my daughters," Shayla introduced with deliberate casualness. "Destiny, hope, and faith." Dylan's face drained of color as he processed the simple math. "Daughters? 3? Triplets," Shayla confirmed, her voice even. "They just turned 15 years old." The implication hung in the air between them. Dylan swallowed hard, his composure cracking visibly as he calculated dates and realized the truth. He began, unable to complete the sentence. "Yes, Dylan, they're your biological daughters." Her voice remained steady, but carried an undercurrent of steel, the ones you paid $5,000 to resolve. The girls, who had been watching this exchange with increasing confusion and dawning realization, stiffened at these words. They had never been told the specific circumstances of their father's absence, only that he had chosen not to be involved in their lives. "Mom?" Destiny questioned, her analytical mind rapidly processing this new information. "Who exactly is this man?" Dylan extended a trembling hand. I'm an old friend of your mother's." "Actually," Shayla interrupted, her voice clear enough to attract attention from nearby tables, "this is Dylan Miller, CEO of Miller Ventures, and he is also your biological father, the one who decided we weren't worthy of being part of his life." A hush fell over the immediate vicinity as people registered the unfolding drama. The Japanese executives watched with inscrutable expressions, cultural reserve masking whatever judgment they might be forming. "Shayla, could we possibly speak in private?" Dylan implored, his eyes darting nervously to the attentive observers around them. "Why?" She raised an eyebrow. "Are you concerned about your public image now?" A small, serene smile played at her lips. "Interesting how $5,000 seemed such a generous amount to you back then. Did you know I recently donated $5 million to programs supporting single mothers in Boston? I thought of you when I signed the check." The triplets' eyes widened with comprehension of the full picture, pieces of a puzzle they hadn't known existed suddenly fitting into place. Faith, with her natural legal mind, was the first to fully process the implications. "You abandoned us before we were even born?" she asked directly, her voice holding the precise, measured tone that had already intimidated opposing debate teams. "Because we were inconvenient for your career?" Dylan appeared to physically shrink under her scrutiny. "Things were complicated. I was young, immature." "We were the same age," Shayla countered evenly. "I was 23, in college like you, with dreams and ambitions like you. The difference is that I accepted responsibility while you ran from it." The Japanese executives had drawn closer, clearly intrigued by the drama. The eldest, Tanaka, bowed slightly toward Shayla. "Ms. Thompson, the CEO of Resilience Foods, it is an honor to meet you personally. We greatly admire your work on food security in Southeast Asia." Dylan's face registered another shock as the pieces connected. You're the CEO of Resilience Foods?" "Founder and CEO," she corrected gently. "Company valued at $2.8 billion in the last funding round." She tilted her head slightly. "And you, Dylan? How is Miller Ventures faring? I heard you faced difficulties after those unsuccessful real estate investments." His expression confirmed her intelligence was accurate. "We're restructuring, temporarily." "How interesting," Shayla commented, reaching into her clutch to extract a sleek document. "Because we've just acquired a majority stake in your company through our subsidiary Destiny Holdings. The board will vote tomorrow on your continued tenure as CEO." The Japanese executives exchanged meaningful glances, clearly reassessing their position in light of this revelation. Dylan looked as though he might physically collapse. You bought my company? For revenge?" "For business, Dylan. Just business." Shayla's smile was genuine for the first time. "Revenge would be far too small for my current lifestyle." She gestured subtly toward her daughters. "Besides, your daughters are now technically your bosses, as indirect shareholders. Isn't that ironic?" Destiny stepped forward, her analytical mind already processing the implications. "As I understand corporate governance, this acquisition gives us significant influence over strategic direction and executive appointments." "Quite right," Shayla confirmed proudly. Faith, ever the legal mind, added, "including compensation packages and performance reviews." Hope, not to be outdone by her sisters, studied Dylan's face with an artist's perceptive eye. "You have our eyebrows," she observed simply, "but Mom gave us everything else that matters." Dylan looked desperately between them, his carefully constructed world visibly crumbling. "Shayla, please, we need to discuss this privately. There must be some arrangement we can reach." "Arrangement?" Shayla echoed, the word hanging between them like a specter from the past. "Like the arrangement you proposed 15 years ago? $5,000 to make your inconvenient mistakes disappear?" Mr. Tanaka cleared his throat politely. "Mr. Miller, perhaps we should continue our discussion another time. It seems you have important family matters to address." With perfect composure, he and his colleagues bowed respectfully to Shayla before withdrawing, effectively abandoning Dylan in his moment of crisis. As word spread through the gala, subtle attention focused on their corner of the room. Phones discreetly captured images, conversations hushed to better overhear the drama, and New York's elite witnessed the real-time collapse of Dylan Miller's carefully constructed facade. "Our lawyers will contact you tomorrow regarding the transition process," Shayla informed him professionally, as though concluding any business meeting. "I suggest you prepare your team for significant organizational changes." With that, she guided her daughters away, leaving Dylan standing alone, stunned and diminished in the midst of the glittering event. As they moved through the crowd, Shayla felt a curious lightness, as though a weight she hadn't fully acknowledged had finally lifted. The confrontation she had simultaneously dreaded and anticipated for 15 years had come and gone, leaving her not destroyed but strengthened. Later that evening, as they returned to their hotel suite, the girls bombarded her with questions. "Why didn't you ever tell us exactly who he was?" demanded Destiny. "Or that he literally paid you to get rid of us?" added Hope, her artistic sensitivity translating to emotional insight. Shayla sat on the plush sofa, gathering her thoughts before responding. "I didn't want his rejection to define your sense of self-worth. You are extraordinary young women, not because of him or despite him, but because of who you've always been." Faith, ever contemplative, asked the most penetrating question. "Did you plan this? The acquisition? The confrontation? All of it? The acquisition was a business decision, Shayla answered honestly. Miller Ventures has valuable assets but poor leadership. As for the confrontation, life sometimes arranges perfect moments of justice that we couldn't orchestrate if we tried. As they prepared for bed, the reality of the evening's events continued to unfold digitally around them. Shayla's phone buzzed with messages from her executive team, board members, and publicists, all responding to initial rumors already circulating through elite Manhattan circles. By morning, the business world would be dissecting every angle of this dramatic corporate and personal collision. Standing at the window overlooking Manhattan's glittering skyline, Shayla felt no triumph or vindication, only completion. The circle that began with rejection in a Cambridge apartment 15 years ago had finally closed in a prestigious Manhattan restaurant. The journey between those points had forged her into someone unrecognizable from the vulnerable young woman Dylan had discarded. As she gazed at the sleeping forms of her daughters, Shayla realized that Dylan's rejection had been, paradoxically, his greatest gift to her. Without it, she might never have discovered her true capabilities, never been forced to develop the strength and resilience that defined her now. The painful crucible of those early years had burned away everything inessential, leaving only determination and clarity of purpose. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, managing the media narrative around the acquisition, integrating Miller Ventures into the Resilience Foods ecosystem, determining Dylan's future role, if any. But tonight, watching her daughters sleep peacefully in their luxurious Manhattan suite, Shayla Thompson allowed herself something rare, a moment of pure satisfaction in the perfect symmetry of fate. While the flashes of cameras captured the moment Dylan's empire publicly crumbled, no one realized that the true confrontation between them was just beginning. A final battle that would determine not only the fate of their businesses, but also the future of three extraordinary young women who carried the legacy of both. While the flashes of cameras captured the moment Dylan's empire publicly crumbled, no one realized that the true confrontation between them was just beginning. A final battle that would determine not only the fate of their businesses, but also the future of three extraordinary young women who carried the legacy of both. The morning headlines exploded across digital and print media with ruthless efficiency. Shayla's tablet screen illuminated with notifications as she sipped her coffee in the Four Seasons suite, watching the business world process last night's revelation. CEO in crisis Dylan Miller, confronted by past and hostile takeover, declared the Wall Street Journal, featuring a candid photo of Dylan's shocked expression as he faced Shayla and the triplets. The New York Times took a different angle. Resilience Foods acquires Miller Ventures, a story of redemption and female empowerment, complete with a professionally shot image of Shayla from her recent Forbes profile. Social media platforms had transformed the encounter into something approaching modern mythology. The abandoned pregnant student who became a billionaire, the privileged man who dismissed her now facing her as his superior. Video clips of their exchange, surreptitiously recorded by gala attendees, had already garnered millions of views. "Mom, we're trending on Twitter," announced Hope, scrolling through her phone. "And there's a hashtag called #ResilienceDaughters." Faith looked up from her tablet, her expression troubled. "They're calling it the ultimate revenge takeover." "Is that what this is? Revenge?" Shayla set down her coffee cup and considered her daughter's question carefully. The girls sat around the elegant breakfast table in their hotel robes, three variations of the same thoughtful face turned toward her expectantly. This was the conversation she had been preparing for since last night. "Come sit with me," Shayla said, moving to the living area of the suite. When they had settled around her, she took a deep breath. "I need to tell you the complete truth about your father and why I never told you his identity." For the next hour, Shayla shared the unvarnished reality of Dylan's rejection. His cruel dismissal of her as not sophisticated enough, the envelope with $5,000, his statement that a girl from Roxbury didn't fit into his future plans. She explained how his abandonment had initially devastated her but ultimately forged her determination. "I never wanted you to feel defined by his rejection," she concluded. "You are complete, extraordinary, perfect, exactly as you are. His absence never diminished who you were meant to become." The girls absorbed this information with remarkable composure. Destiny, always analytical, processed it first. "So when you saw the opportunity to acquire his company, was it motivated by this history?" she asked directly. "The acquisition makes perfect business sense," Shayla explained. "Miller Ventures has valuable assets but poor leadership, but I won't pretend there isn't a certain symmetry to the situation that I appreciate." Hope, whose artistic sensibility made her the most emotionally intuitive, reached for her mother's hand. "All those years when you worked so hard, when you went without things for yourself to give us opportunities. He was just living his fancy life without a second thought about us." "Most likely," Shayla acknowledged gently. Faith, the future lawyer, remained contemplative. "He'll try to contact us now, won't he? Try to be part of our lives suddenly?" As if summoned by her words, Shayla's phone buzzed with an incoming call. The screen displayed "unknown number," but she somehow knew exactly who it was. "Girls, I need to take this," she said, moving toward the window for privacy. "Remember, whatever happens next is your choice. No one can force a relationship you don't want." Accepting the call, she heard Dylan's voice, strained and unfamiliar without its usual confidence. "Shayla, we need to talk. About the girls. About everything. Can I see them? Meet them properly? After 15 years, you want to be a father?" The question hung between them, weighted with history. "I've changed, Shayla. Seeing you yesterday, seeing our daughters, I made the biggest mistake of my life." "No, Dylan. You made a decision," she corrected firmly. "A decision that reflected your values at that moment. The consequences of that decision don't disappear because you now realize you chose poorly." They agreed to meet later that day, not the emotional reconciliation Dylan might have hoped for, but a formal business meeting with legal representatives present. Shayla arranged for it to take place in the hotel's executive conference room, deliberately framing the interaction as professional rather than personal. By 2 o'clock that afternoon, the meeting room was prepared. Shayla sat at the head of the polished table, flanked by her corporate legal team. The triplets, after much discussion, had decided to attend, sitting together on one side of the table, a united front of composed curiosity. When Dylan entered, his appearance betrayed his distress. His typically immaculate presentation showed subtle signs of disarray, a tie slightly askew, hair less perfectly styled than usual. He had clearly expected an intimate conversation, not a formal assembly with attorneys present. "What is this?" he asked, gesturing to the assembled group. "This is a business meeting," Shayla explained calmly, "regarding the future of Miller Ventures under Resilience Foods ownership." She gestured for him to sit. As he did, his eyes kept returning to the triplets, searching their faces for reflections of himself, for some connection to these extraordinary young women who shared his DNA but nothing of his life experience. "Our proposal is straightforward," Shayla began, signaling her attorney to distribute documents. "You will remain as CEO of Miller Ventures for a transitional period of 6 months, reporting directly to the new board. After that period, if you meet established performance metrics, you may retain an executive position, though not as CEO." Dylan stared at the papers in disbelief. "This is about business, not about reconciliation?" Faith, demonstrating the legal mind that already had her teachers predicting a future on the Supreme Court, spoke up. "It's about competence, Mr. Miller. Your company has lost 40% of market value under your leadership in the past 3 years." Her tone was precise, clinical. "It's not personal, it's just business, as you yourself taught our mother 15 years ago." Dylan flinched visibly at having his words reflected back by the daughter he'd never known. "As for your daughters," Shayla continued smoothly, "they have expressed interest in getting to know you gradually, on their own terms. There are no guarantees of a relationship, only the opportunity for proper introduction. Dylan signed the transition documents with a shaking hand, his empire reduced to a subsidiary in the corporate structure his former girlfriend had built without him. "Everything I've worked for," he murmured, watching as his signature transferred control of Miller Ventures. "No, Dylan. Everything I've worked for," Shayla corrected gently. "While you climbed corporations with privileged connections, I built something from nothing, working 3 shifts while pregnant with triplets, finishing college between diaper changes, raising 3 extraordinary human beings, and revolutionizing an industry, all alone because you decided we weren't worthy of being part of your brilliant future." The following morning, as news of the acquisition formalized, the stock market responded with approval. Resilience Foods shares rose 3% on opening, while Miller Ventures stabilized after weeks of decline, the market clearly confident in the new leadership structure. In the limousine heading to the airport, the triplets discussed their impressions of their biological father with the thoughtful maturity that consistently amazed Shayla. "He seems smaller than I imagined," Hope observed pensively. "Not physically, but as a person." Destiny nodded agreement. "It's strange to think half our DNA comes from him, yet feel no connection whatsoever." "We should give him a chance," Faith decided after a moment's reflection. "Not for his sake, but for ours, to understand our origins." Shayla watched her daughters with indescribable pride. They possessed the strength she had been forced to discover in her darkest hours, but without the scars she carried. As their private jet lifted off from Teterboro Airport, Shayla gazed down at the Manhattan skyline receding below them. The city she had once feared revisiting was now just another location where her business empire extended its reach. Dylan Miller, the man who had once made her feel insignificant, was now merely another executive in her growing organization. The true victory wasn't in having defeated him in business or exposed him socially. It lay in the 3 brilliant young women seated across from her, discussing their future contributions to the world with passion and purpose. It existed in the woman she had become, not defined by abandonment, but strengthened by the journey it had inadvertently initiated. The $5,000 check that she had never used for Dylan's intended purpose had indeed become the first investment in what grew into a billion-dollar empire. The rejection that should have destroyed her had instead catalyzed her rise. The life he had discarded as insufficient for his standards now surpassed his by every measurable metric. "Where do we go from here, Mom?" Hope asked, always curious about their next adventure. Shayla smiled, finally free from the weight of the past. "Anywhere we want, sweetheart. The entire world is open to us." And it was, unlimited, unshadowed by past ghosts. Just the infinite horizon of possibilities she had built through the purest, most unshakable determination to prove, first to herself and then to the world, that she had always been more than enough. While the plane took off from New York, neither Shayla nor her daughters could imagine how this confrontation would change not only their lives, but would inspire thousands of women around the world to transform rejection into strength, a legacy far more powerful than any financial empire ever built. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.